Hello everybody, welcome into my latest live video. Today is the 11th of April 2021. My name is Carey Holzman. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight as I continue to unbury myself from a ton of work. Many months ago, a system came to me for repair that had a bad motherboard and it was under warranty, but the customer just lost faith in the board, didn't want to pursue the warranty replacement, didn't want to wait 2 weeks. They wanted a solution in place ASAP and preferably something different because of their bad experience. So I said, well, can I keep the old board? I'll send it in for warranty. I'll get a replacement and I'll use it in something in the future. They said, I don't care, just get rid of it and get my system up and running. And so I sent the board back to Gigabyte for the RMA process and received another back. And this was in the summertime last year, it was about a year ago. And this is a Gigabyte Aorus Gaming 5 Wi-Fi board that has been sitting for about a year. And I realize I don't know where I put the I/O shield or the antennas, but I can go on eBay and order that stuff. So I'm not worried about that. But what I am worried about is how old the BIOS is on this board. Now, in theory, socket AM4 motherboard should work with a socket AM4 CPU, and there may be some exceptions if it gets too old, but I'm not quite sure what those exceptions are because I haven't had a whole lot of luck with AMD, so I don't know their entire product line because every single time they come out with something new, it sells out, and before it's practically restocked, there's something else new that's even better than what came out. So we started with there was the 1700 and then the 2700 and then the 3600 and then we're at the 5800. Here's a 5800X. It's about a $450 CPU. Latest and greatest, the 5850 is like $1,000 or more, I don't know. But so the 5800X on a board that's over a year old that clearly isn't going to have a BIOS that's going to recognize this chip. So what I'm guessing is going to happen is I'm going to plug this chip onto this board and it's not going to boot. So what do you do? We're going to talk about that today. Welcome in everybody, my friends in blue. Let's see, Rick Lakes contributes $15. He says, hello, Carey. Hope you are well. Hey, Rick, good to see you, my friend. There's Michael Dane, John Paul Bacon, David A. Matthew Goff. There's Armando Garcia, Chris L., Vern Mahoney, David A., Francois Guibal, Yidis Maximus, and Ron Hillier, Matthew Camp 915. Welcome in, my friends. Thanks for joining me tonight. I have a bunch of errands to run tomorrow, so I don't know that I'll have time for a video tomorrow, which is why I'm doing one tonight. Now, what I suspect is going to happen, as I mentioned, is I think the system's going to power on and we're not going to get any post screen. And on some motherboards, there's something called a BIOS flashback, or the ability to flash a BIOS on a motherboard without any RAM or CPU installed. In fact, having a RAM or CPU installed using the BIOS flashback utility could damage the board. Now, it's very few boards that come with the BIOS flashback utility. There'll often be one different colored USB port or have a different color around the USB port on the I/O shield for most manufacturers that support this feature. And the reason this feature is supported is specifically the scenario where you have an old motherboard that doesn't have the latest BIOS, but you're putting on the latest chip. Well, in cases of boards that don't have BIOS flashback, which is the vast majority of boards, what you're going to have to do is find somebody with an older CPU or take it to a professional repair shop where they will have spare CPUs that they can pop into the motherboard for enough time to flash the BIOS to the latest version, and then you're good to go. And that should be a very inexpensive service. And I know AMD was offering a BIOS repair kit with a credit card to hold the spare CPU to make sure that you returned it, and they were sending one of the cheapest things they could possibly send to address this issue. Now, looking on the back of this board, we don't have the little recess button. There'll be a little recess button back here if the motherboard supports BIOS flashback. And BIOS flashback takes about 9.5 to 10.5 minutes. It's much more time consuming to flash the BIOS that way than to do it the traditional way that I show you. But it is possible. I mean, I don't know what BIOS this board has. It was sent to me from Gigabyte as an RMA return, as a replacement to a bad board. And I never took it out of its anti-static bag until today. Just before going live, I cut the tape on the anti-static bag and set it on the box. And that's when I realized I didn't have the old I/O shield or the old Wi-Fi antennas. I don't know. I must have had them, I would think. I don't know what I did with them. So I'll have to, resolve that later once I get everything running. So what I want to do is what most people at home would do, which is you've got a board, you've got a chip, you're going to put the two together, and you're just going to assume that everything's going to be okay. And I'm hoping that everything isn't going to be okay, so you can watch how you can make it okay. Now, for most people, they're not going to have enough money laying around to just go buy an older CPU for the sole purpose of using it for 5 minutes, and then you don't need it anymore. This is where a PC shop or a friend with a computer may come in handy versus a do-it-yourself project. And if I would have purchased a brand new motherboard at the same time I purchased the brand new chip, this isn't as likely to occur. But knowing that this board has been sitting in a package for a year and this chip didn't exist last year, I'm pretty confident this board is not going to know what this is. That's what the BIOS update does. It helps it to recognize compatible CPUs. Well, I mean, it does more than that, but that's one of the things it does and why those BIOS updates can be very important. So I guess we'll throw some RAM in there. I'm not really prepared here, so I have some RAM laying here. We can use some old, what is this, T-Force Dark. I used this in something a long time ago. You can tell I'm breaking out some of the old parts lately. Yeah, this is 8 gigs DDR4 3000. This was used in something. I can't remember what I used this RAM in. It's a good-looking RAM, though, but it's small. But it's for testing purposes to get us up and running. Obviously, I wouldn't pair a 5800X with just these 8 gigs each or 8 gigs total. I don't know. Either way, it doesn't matter. This is just for testing purposes. This has built-in graphics, so we don't need to use a graphics card. Hallelujah. And I'm not quite sure if I should be using DDRs 1 and 2 or 3 and 4, but I'm going to default to 1 and 2. Oh, the heatsink just kind of buckled at the top, on top of this RAM. That's interesting. Very interesting. It doesn't really do anything but look pretty, but it just bothers me that it was so easy for me to squish it together like that. And then we'll go ahead and put this other stick of RAM in here. Now, as for the CPU, it's got to sit down into the socket in the heatsink. I'm just going to use this temporary heatsink. The 5800X doesn't come with one. They're assuming, because it's a high-end desktop processor, that you'll provide your own high-end cooling solution more than just an OEM solution. But because this is just for testing, it doesn't really matter. We need some kind of cooler on there just to give it a fair test, but we're not going to run Prime 95 on this thing with that cooler. We just need to make sure it'll boot. We could even install Windows. We don't want to tax the system too hard, but we can run it for hours and hours and hours as long as we're not really pushing it really hard without having any heat issues. In fact, I'm not even going to use any thermal compound. So this is just for testing, just to see what's going to happen. Once it's verified as working, then I'll consider what RAM I actually want to put in there permanently, as well as what cooler I want to use, if I want to go with a liquid cooler, or even what case. I don't even know what case to put it in yet. I have to make sure it's up and running before I do anything else. So I'm not over-committing here to a complete build. You see I'm cutting the tape on the box. It's never been opened before. This is the AMD Ryzen 7 5800X. I'll bring that up to the camera. You can see what I'm working with here. You can tell from the thickness or the thinness of the box, there is no cooler in this box. Sometimes people ask, but if you just look at the box, you should be able to come to the conclusion without having to ask. There's no way a cooler would fit in there. When you open the box, you want to talk about wasteful packaging. Why is the box this big? Well, look inside. It's just got filler. The only thing that we really purchased is right here, this piece, and the documentation. It could have been sold in a package size of a package of cigarettes. For some reason, they've decided to use as much wasteful packaging as possible. It says the 5800X does need a graphics card. I thought it said it had built-in. Doesn't it say it's got built-in graphics here? Oh, it says discrete graphics card required, not included. Yeah, okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you for the contribution and the correction. My bad. A Ghost Shadow contributed $2. It says 5800X is not supposed to have a GPU built in. And Michael Fogelstead contributed $3.99 to also make that correction. It's my understanding, I think, I might be wrong on this because I don't know the AMD line that well, but I think if it ends in the letter X, there is no discrete graphics. I read that too quickly and I thought maybe AMD changed things. So I'll have to grab a graphics card, which is a bummer, but that's okay. I've got a few laying around here we can borrow for this task. I don't even think I'll put a solid state drive in it at this point. I just want to see if it boots up. And obviously having a graphics card when one is required would result, or rather not having a graphics card when one is required, would result in the exact same symptoms as a CPU that's not detected. So you got to be a little careful when you're building with systems, especially AMD systems, where the discrete graphics are required. Because if I falsely believed, because I misread, that graphics were built into this and I'm plugged into the motherboard, I'm going to get no video out of it. On top of that, if it's not recognizing the CPU, with or without a graphics card, I'm not going to get any video out of it. So that could have been two problems with the same exact symptom, and resolving one, let's say I'm turning this thing on for the first time, I get no video, you guys go, hey Carey, you need a graphics card. Oh yeah, okay, so I grab a graphics card, I put it in, same exact thing happens. I turn it on, blank screen, nothing happens. But then that'll be because the BIOS doesn't recognize the CPU. So you can get, as a technician or as somebody diagnosing a computer, you can often have multiple valid solutions that can cause the symptom that you're experiencing that is exactly the same symptom in every way, shape, and form. I'm going to go ahead and put the CPU in the socket right now, and then I'm going to take these little plastic lockdown, I don't know what they call them, the supports for the clip-on coolers. Let's see, this has got to go this way. One of the reasons I don't like using thermal compound when testing AMD's CPUs is AMD still uses the old school pins on the bottom of the CPU like it's, the 1990s. And what will happen, and as happened here demonstrated on the channel, when the cooler and the compound don't separate, you can rip the chip right out of the socket. Some people mention twisting it, but you can actually twist if you twist it as the CPU comes out of the socket, you will permanently damage it. The CPU will be completely unrepairable. So, I'd rather lift it straight up, because if the CPU comes up with it, then there's no damage to the pins that way. If you twist it and the CPU comes up, you not only will damage the pins, you'll damage them beyond repair. So that's a downside of AMD's Ryzen CPUs, their AM4 socket. So be aware of it, just be aware of it, and then of course prepare accordingly. I'm going to go ahead and remove these plastic, I guess they're like CPU retention brackets or something. I don't know what they call them. And typically I save the stuff, put it in a Ziploc bag to give to a customer in case they want to switch out the cooler to something that would require those at some future date. But once again, I'm not going to put any thermal compound on here. This is not a permanent solution. This is just for testing, so everything will be okay. It does have thermal protections built into it anyway, but in a repair shop, you certainly wouldn't keep going and applying thermal compound in testing scenarios unless you were testing cooling, or you were going to, you know, benchmark the computer and put a heavy load on it. I also normally wouldn't tighten it down with an electric driver, but again, in testing, we do a lot of things we're trying to be efficient and quick, get our results, and then adjust and adapt what is needed as a result of those results. Once everything has been ironed out, all the wrinkles are out of it, then we can say, okay, now we knowingly have everything working. Now let's decide how we really want to put this together. You know, how much RAM do we really want to use, or what size SSD do we want to use, or what type, or what cooler do we want to use, what case. None of that is even up to be considered right now, because I have a boatload of parts and some of them may not work. This motherboard that was sent as a return from Gigabyte as a warranty return has never been tested. I'm assuming Gigabyte sent me a working board. If Gigabyte didn't send me a working board, then it's going to be really hard to get this 5800X working with a BIOS update or not. So I'm going to show you how we go through that whole diagnostic process today. We keep everything bare minimum as possible to avoid any potential problem with other items being plugged in that are not needed. So I'm going to need a keyboard and mouse. I'll go ahead and plug the keyboard and mouse on right now just to get it out of the way. And then I've got to find a graphics card around here that I can grab and slap in there. And then we need a power supply. Let me grab the power supply right here. And we'll go ahead and plug that on the board just to get that ready. Once again, we want minimal items plugged into the board. We don't want to have the internet plugged in or any USB devices other than the keyboard and mouse. And this will help our diagnostic by removing variables. Mendel P with $1.99. Thank you for your contribution and your support. We've got about 350 people watching live right now. Thanks you guys for joining me tonight. See if we can't share this experience together, and maybe we'll each learn a little something along the way, like the fact that it needs a discrete graphics card. Now, somewhere back here, I have a graphics card. What did I do with it? I put it somewhere. Ah, here it is. Phew. I can't believe I misplaced that. This is what? A Gigabyte 1650. 1650, 4 gig. Perfect for testing. This doesn't even require power from the power supply. This is a great card for this exact purpose. So it's another cable I don't have to hook up. It's not a huge card. It's going to be difficult to release. So every repair shop, if they're a good repair shop, in my opinion, they would have things like this in the shop for this purpose, for testing. This is not something a person at home would necessarily be expected to have. And that's why sometimes when people ask me for advice on how to fix a problem, my advice is to take it to a shop, because you could very easily spend a lot of money buying unnecessary parts and some items may not be returnable, in which case you're going to spend more money to fix it yourself, and it's going to take you more time than if you took it to a professional. That doesn't mean you can't fix it. It just means it doesn't make any financial sense. It's cost prohibitive and time prohibitive for you to pursue that unless it's just something you enjoy. For most normal, regular folks, they would realize, okay, this is going to make more sense to take somewhere where I don't have to buy a bunch of different parts until I figure out what's wrong. Or if it's a case of a BIOS where they're going to have an older CPU. In fact, if they don't, that's a sign you shouldn't take your computer there ever again because they don't have the proper tools. Anybody can open a computer repair shop. Doesn't mean they're qualified. It doesn't mean they should be opening or running a computer repair shop. In my opinion, a proper computer repair shop will have things like graphics cards and memory and CPUs just on the shelf for testing. If it's so small peanuts that they can't afford to have that kind of stuff laying around the shop, you might as well just fix it yourself, because they might just end up buying a bunch of stuff and charging you for stuff you didn't need because they didn't have it and they're not going to buy it. So I stay away. I recommend avoiding shops like that. Stay away from shops like that. Tweaks contributes $2 Canadian. He says, is that a 30 series card I see in the streamer? Yeah, that's the RTX 3070. Yeah. Okay, so where was I? Oh, I need switches. I got my front panel header right here. We'll plug that in just like this. I don't need an SSD. I don't need any storage. I've got RAM, got the graphics card. I've got to give it power, and I've got to plug the HDMI cable in it, and let's see what happens. Okay, that's set up. We'll flip the switch to the on position. You'll see the board flashed. That's normal when I initially gave it power, and which is another reason why I always recommend you have the power switch in the off position on the power supply until after everything's all plugged in, and then just before you're ready to turn on the system, then you flip the switch on the power supply. That releases that initial influx of power. And now the board has power flowing through it, as every motherboard does, even though the power is off. It's not truly off until you hit that switch on the back of the power supply. So I'll go ahead and I'll tap the power button here. Fans are spinning, so let's go over to camera input 2 and see if we can get any video. Kind of curious how this is going to respond. I'm really hopeful that it's going to sit here and do nothing, because this is a common technical support question, mostly with AMD systems. Again, with the frequency that AMD releases new CPUs, it's quite possible that you purchased a new board that might have been sitting on a shelf for 6 months. Doesn't seem likely, given the pandemic. Everybody's been buying computer parts like it's going to be Christmas tomorrow. But it's possible that you could have some old inventory that's not updated with the latest BIOS. And unless I have the RAM in the wrong sockets, that's something I could verify. It's possible that putting the RAM in different sockets could also result, once again, in the exact same symptoms. I had to make sure the other end of the HDMI cable was in the capture card. So you can see we have no joy here from the system. It should have done something by now. And that would indicate to me that we have either bad motherboard, bad RAM, or bad CPU. But given that we know it's a new model of CPU and it's an older board, that would suggest to me that we probably just need to do a BIOS update. But because we don't have the BIOS flashback feature on this board, the only way we can do a BIOS update is by temporarily installing an older model AMD Ryzen CPU. Could be really cheap. Actually, it doesn't have to be a Ryzen. I think they have some other socketed AM4 chips, I can't think of what the names are, that are really inexpensive that you could buy. But what a shame that you'd have to buy it just to use it for 5 minutes. Then you'd have no use for it ever again. And I'm hoping that's going to be the case here today. So I'll go ahead and turn this back off. Doesn't want to turn off. That's interesting. So I'll flip the switch here. And I'm going to leave everything plugged in, except I'm going to take the CPU out and replace it with an older model CPU. I've got a pretty old CPU that I purchased specifically just to have an old AMD CPU laying around. This is a Ryzen 5 1500X. And this is an ideal CPU to use or to have as a spare in a repair shop because it's inexpensive. It gets your diagnostic job. It enables you to do a proper diagnostic for your customers without having a whole ton of money sitting in inventory you won't sell. And if you break it, if it turns out there was a power supply that short-circuited the board, it fries the CPU, you got to eat that cost. It's not the customer's fault. It's your, if I use a shop part and I fry the shop part in a customer's hardware because of some other, problem with it, that's on me. So I want to use something cheap. That very rarely happens. So I'm okay with that risk. When I say the last one is always the hardest one. I should have started at this side. All right, so we'll take the cooler off of it here momentarily. We're going to remove the chip. I'm going to set it with the pins facing up. I don't want to set the weight of the chip onto its pins. Certainly not the way it works within the socket. The socket has a bunch of little holes that have they're divided, and those dividers are what provide the support to the CPU, so it's not putting all of the weight of the CPU on its own pins. Those pins are very delicate. And here I've got the Ryzen, what I say was 5. And we'll go ahead and pop that in there. And we'll drop it down, and then we'll put the cooler back on. So I'm hoping this is all going to go the way I expect it to. But one of the things I enjoy about doing this live is you can actually witness the thrill and excitement of what it is to be a PC repair technician. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't predict everything correctly, but I have to deal with the results either way. And I want you to notice the calm and logical manner with which I will react to any unexpected results, or likewise, the expected results. In either case, it makes no difference to me other than time. Is this something I'm going to be able to get done in an hour, or does this look like it's going to be a 2-day job? Well, one way or another, we'll get it fixed. We'll get it sorted. So, I mean, it's literally that easy and it's that quick to swap the CPU. So that's why I say any legitimate repair store should have spare CPUs, because this would be a very common occurrence in a repair shop where a customer buys brand new stuff and they're like, I just got everything and it won't work. And, if sometimes you'll ask questions like, well, have you built a system before, or is this your first time? Did it ever work, or has it never worked? How long have you had these parts? Where did you get them? Did you buy them from a questionable source, or did you get them from a reputable source like Newegg or Amazon or B&H Photo? Or did you go on eBay or AliExpress and get them from a questionable source? These are the kinds of questions, again, a good repair shop would ask the customer. And then, of course, it'd be, well, what CPU did you buy? Let's take an inventory of what you bought. So, you bought that CPU and that motherboard? Could be a BIOS update. And that's generally how the person behind the counter is going to get to writing the trouble ticket out, because the customers, they don't know what's wrong. And you don't know anything about the customer. You've never met them before. You don't know how long they've been working on this, or who they've talked to, or if they made a bad situation worse because they didn't bring it to you sooner. So with the new CPU in it, let's fire it back up and see if it turns on this time, having changed nothing else. Turn the power on. Fan is spinning. Let me go over to, again, camera input 2. Ooh, I see it lighting up. Did it light up like that before? Oh, I heard the fan slowing down. That's a good sign. Oh, the fan stopped. That's interesting. Now it's spinning up again. That usually is an indication of the BIOS training the RAM, usually. On a first boot, it can take up to 90 seconds. As I recall, when I turned it on last time, the fan spun and never stopped its speed or changed its speed. So I'm hopeful. Yep, there it is. Okay, now, so far things are going as I predicted. It's fine. So BIOS has been reset. Please reconfigure BIOS. Let's see what BIOS version we've got. We'll go right up here to System. It says we've got version F50 for the X470 Gaming 5 Wi-Fi. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my browser here on the streaming computer, and I'm going to go to Google, and I'm going to search in Google rather for X470 Gaming 5 Wi-Fi BIOS. And I like Google because usually the thing that I'm searching for is right up at the top. I don't have to dig through other results if I type the search the way I'm accustomed to. I am predicting people are going to start talking the same way they search. There'll be future generations that are just going to go, how much Bitcoin? That's how they're going to talk to each other. Mark my words, that's going to be a thing. So in the results that come up, again, the very first result that Google's offering me is gigabyte.com, going to the Aorus Gaming Wi-Fi. And let's see if I can share that screen with you. Let's see, let's turn off camera 2 for a minute. And I'll turn on window capture for Chrome. There it is. Why is it little? Let's make that big. Oh, I can see a problem. Well, you can't see me. That's fine. You don't need to look at me. You're welcome. So looking at the X470 Aorus Gaming Wi-Fi product page, you'll notice in every motherboard manufacturer does this. ASRock does it, MSI does it, ASUS does it, Gigabyte does it. You'll see two different support links. One up at the top of the page that says service support, and one down here that says support. We want this support, which is specific to this product. And this support up here is just generic support where you have to drill down to what it is you want support for. That's why there are two. Again, one does it and then the others just copy them. So we want to click on that, and we'll go to scroll down here under the BIOS and see what version is available. So we have F50. We should be able to find our current version that verifies that we're in the, we've got the right board selected. You should see your previous version here. And then we can see there was a 51 that was released. There was a 60, a 6.0, and then a 6.1A. Now we don't need anything but the latest one unless there are notations that warn you otherwise. So we can skip 51, we can skip 60, we'll go right to 61 and download that. Now, once that is downloaded, I'm going to extract that file to my flash drive. Let me see if I can make that, there we go. So I have the file downloaded here on the streaming computer, and we're going to extract that right now, just again to a folder on the streaming computer. Now when we extract it, see, I should be able to show you this. you're going to see, at least with Gigabyte, you're going to see 4 files are extracted. There's an auto exec, a flash executable, a README file, which contains information about this BIOS, and then finally the BIOS file, which ends in the version number, right, .61A. And I'm just going to right click and copy just that one file, because I don't need the others, onto a flash drive that I'm plugging in. And once again, if we go back to me, right here, I got my flash drive. I'm going to plug it right in here to the streamer. And that's going to open up. There it goes. And then I will paste that file. And that's done. So I'll close these windows. And I can close this browser as well. And I can remove the flash drive. I don't have to safely eject it. And I can place it into any USB port on the back of the machine here. And we'll give that a minute to handshake and recognize each other. We'll go back to camera input 2. And we should be able to choose the, if we go down here at the very bottom of the screen, there's like a down arrow. If you see it right down here. And all I have to do is hover the mouse over it. I do not have to click the mouse. And you'll see the last option, it says Q-Flash all the way down here. We'll click on Q-Flash one time. Update BIOS, it's already highlighted in yellow. Click once. Because this motherboard has no storage on it at all, the only storage is the USB I plugged in. That's the only place it can look for a BIOS file, and it finds it. So we're going to double click on that. It says it can't read it. I've seen that happen on Gigabyte boards before, and you just do it again. And again. And then it read it. And we can also update the backup BIOS if we want to. We'll check that box and press to start the BIOS. And now the BIOS is going to update. And this is going to be a hands-off situation. You really want to leave the computer alone for as much time as it needs to complete this process. I would recommend not playing around with a keyboard or mouse, and I wouldn't interfere in any way, shape, or form or interrupt this process, or you could brick the motherboard. Now, because we're also updating the backup BIOS, this may take a little bit longer than a normal BIOS update. I don't have to update the backup BIOS, but I just wanted to for the heck of it. Knowing that if the BIOS were to become corrupted and it restored from the backup BIOS, we'd be back in the same situation where it won't recognize the new CPU again until the BIOS is updated. So I feel like updating the backup BIOS is important for any customer that would receive this computer. If they were into a BIOS corruption situation, we could resolve it over the phone, because Gigabyte will ask, do you want to restore your backup BIOS from your backup BIOS? And you go, yeah, and then of course it will recognize that CPU. If that makes any sense. It's just a preventive measure. And as a result, it will take a little bit longer. So I'm talking to you, filling up the empty space, because otherwise we're just staring at a screen. So I'm just trying to think what else I can talk to you about while we're waiting to help keep you distracted. When you're doing this yourself, find a way to distract yourself, because there may be times when you think it's done and it's not yet done, and then your interference may prevent the process from completing, and it could brick the motherboard. The worst thing that could happen is we would have a power outage during this process. And of course, if we had a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply, that's a battery backup, we probably get 20-30 minutes off a battery backup. Where I am broadcasting from, I have never seen a power outage ever. So the likelihood of that occurring right now in this BIOS update process is, let's just say the odds are very much in my favor. There's not going to be a problem with power. A lot of people think of, Murphy's Law. If it's going to happen, now's when it's going to happen. Well, if you've been watching my channel from some time, then you know that I update BIOSes regularly on new builds, upgrades, and repairs on both desktops and laptops. And never once has a BIOS update ever not worked. Never once have I lost power during a BIOS update. And never once do I interrupt a BIOS update. So we're about 50% done. And like I said, patience is really, really important. And it's really important that you leave the computer alone. And the computer will either go back into the BIOS when it's completely finished, or it will tell you there's no bootable device found. In either case, you know it's now done and you can turn the machine off. And then at that point, we can put the other CPU back in it and see if it then works correctly. And that's why this is best left to a repair shop, somebody that has the tools in case things don't go the way they're supposed to. This is an ideal scenario here where everything should go the way it's supposed to. I'm guessing everything's been so far doing exactly what I expect it to do. But if it didn't, you definitely want it in a shop. I've always said if I was going to get hit by a car, I would prefer if that car was an ambulance, because they'll have everything they need to help me right there. I won't have to wait. Much the same way, if you're fixing things yourself, it's probably going to take more time. And if unexpected things happen, you're going to have to research and ask questions and figure out how to proceed forward. Whereas a professional repair shop shouldn't even be a speed bump for them, and they'll just keep moving forward until it's resolved. At least if they're any good, in my opinion. We're at 71% of the BIOS update. And if you notice on the left side of the screen, I didn't really talk about that, but if you notice at the left side, it says current flash, and that's giving us all the information of the current BIOS we have now. Below that, it says update BIOS, and that's giving us the BIOS version and BIOS date of the version we are going to. So that's from this BIOS at the top to the BIOS at the bottom. And that's just confirmation of what you have and what you're getting. The checksum, you don't have to worry about that checksum. The BIOS, if the checksum was off, the BIOS would not allow you to use that file. What else can I tell you? We're just waiting, just a waiting game. This is all being done in real time during a live broadcast, so I have no, the time that is actually taking, if you watch the clock at the bottom of your screen, or the video length, it's got a minutes and seconds, or hours and minutes and seconds at the bottom right corner of the video, then you can see in real time how long this can take, so you know approximately how long you need to be hands off. Every system may be a little bit different, so unless you're working with exactly the same flash drive and the same BIOS and the same motherboard, your time may be a little different, but you should be within this ballpark. It shouldn't be twice as fast or twice as slow. So now we're doing our first reboot. It's again doing this all on its own. It says no signal because the system is turned off. Now it's turning back on again and initializing and completing that BIOS update. Some motherboard BIOS updates will reboot immediately and others after a while, and some have more work to do after the first boot and others don't. You'll see the system turned itself off again, so it's still applying some of the BIOS update changes. And then once it does that, it will repeat this as many times as necessary. That's why it's important you don't interrupt it, because you may not understand why it's doing this. Now, when it tells us an operating system wasn't found, that tells us the BIOS update was completed successfully and we're done. Because at this point, if you had Windows installed, it would be rebooting into Windows right now. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to turn the machine off. So hit the power button. Power cycles down. I'm going to cut the power here in the back. And I'm going to remove this flash drive. And I always keep this flash drive blank. We should be done with it. But before I pull the CPU, let's go in the BIOS one more time, and let's make sure we have 61A on there. So we'll turn this on just to check that BIOS version. And again, back up here to System. And yes, we have BIOS version F61A, which is dated from just about a week and a half ago. That's a pretty new release. So I'll go ahead and turn it back off. That's it. I just wanted to confirm that. And then we'll go back over to camera 1. And now, again, I'm going to flip the switch here to make sure that that is off. And I'm going to swap the CPUs again. This time I'm going to get this one that's hard to get now instead of saving it for last, because that was miserable. Okay. And again, without any thermal compound on there, it's making it so much easier for me to pull the heatsink off without risking pulling the chip out by its pins. We'll set that one face down. We're going to put the 5800X back in there. Just very gently lay it on top of the socket, and if it's oriented in the proper direction, it'll just fall right in through the holes. I never push down on it. Put the heatsink back on. In theory, this should now boot up and recognize the 5800X. Power back on. We'll switch back over to camera input 2. I see the fan ramping up and slowing down. Wasn't doing that before. Ooh, it's getting a little loud. BIOS is retraining. And we have boot up. Look at that. So it appears that Gigabyte did send us a good board, as I would have assumed they did. It's a little nerve-wracking to have it sitting in a box for nearly a year before I've checked it. And we should see the CPU in here. Oh, wrong keyboard, Carey. CPU here. Go back over here. Thought it would be somewhere in here that tells me what CPU I've got. Not seeing it. Interesting. I wonder if there's a, they call it easy mode sometimes. Yeah, let's click it in easy mode and see if that tells us. There it is. AMD Ryzen 7 5800X 8-core processor. So that's 16 gigs of RAM. Okay, that's fine. So they're 8 gigs apiece. XMP is disabled. I suppose we could turn it on. Normally, I don't recommend turning XMP on unless you've tested the system with a full Windows install and do your benchmarks. Because if you turn XMP on, it can start causing, on some systems, blue screens and other system problems. And if it's a new system, you won't know if you've got bad RAM or a bad component or you installed something wrong. And then it, again, opens up all kinds of opportunities for variables that have to be inspected to be removed from the equation to determine what's causing the fault. So I've used this RAM in the past. I've put it aside because I knew it worked well with AMD processors. And I did have some problems with that, with practically every AMD build last year. But BIOS updates and newer memory seem to be getting along a lot better than they were. So we're making some progress there. But nonetheless, I know this memory has worked in a past AMD system. And with that, let me go back to camera input 1. There I am. And let me turn this off. Does anybody have any questions or comments or concerns about this process? Be happy to address what's on your mind. Once again, this older Ryzen 5 chip will go back into its little box here. What's this one? And this is why I have this chip. Specifically for this purpose. You never know when a customer rolls up and you're going to need a spare CPU to do a BIOS update. And you're going to see that more on AMD systems, far more than you'll ever see that on Intel systems. But part of that has to do with AMD's frequency of releasing new chips, and the backwards compatibility with the socket leads to this problem. Again, if you buy a brand new motherboard and the CPU at the same time, given how inventories are running very lean right now, chances are you're going to be just fine and you're not going to have this problem. If you're going to upgrade an older board like what I did here, know to expect it and be prepared with a plan. Saeed says, good morning from Iran. Well, welcome in. It's good to have folks in that part of the world joining us. I love it. Welcome in, my friend. Jeff wants to know, will updating an Intel BIOS on an AMD motherboard create an issue? It's not possible. The BIOSes today, back in the 90s, it would have been possible to put the wrong BIOS on a board, but now they've instituted a checksum that has to match for that particular board in that particular BIOS file. And the BIOS will not accept the file as a legitimate file unless it meets those prerequisites. So it is almost impossible, to put the wrong BIOS onto a motherboard. I've seen instances where there's a version of a board with Wi-Fi and then a version without it, where the BIOSes are interchangeable, and if you put the wrong BIOS on, you lose your Wi-Fi option, if that was the option you had. But I'm seeing even that less and less now. So for the most part, if you have the wrong BIOS, it will not allow the flash to continue on a modern motherboard. And by modern, I mean within the last 10 years. Chris wants to know, he's wondering how many components get refunded as defective just being incompatible. Well, you've seen me buy a lot of warehouse items, Amazon warehouse items that are returned. And I think I had one that was bad. Out of, how many did I buy? 8 or 10? So I think most of the returns, at least as far as motherboards and video cards and CPUs, are just people either not knowing what they're doing, or they change their mind, but they don't want to pay a restocking fee, so they'll just make something up that something's wrong with it. What is the settings I need to do with my BIOS? Generally speaking, there are no settings you need to adjust in your BIOS. Just loading the default settings or the optimized settings is an option in the BIOS. That's all you're going to need. That's it. Straight out of the box, keep it at default values. You should be good to go. Slow Death wants to know, Carey, the cheap CPU you mentioned before this job is the Athlon. Oh yeah, thank you. But I think a chip with graphics would be more convenient for BIOS updates. Something like a Ryzen 3 2200G. I agree with you, yes, absolutely, for sure. Does this one, what was this one? 1500X. Yeah, I think if they end in X, they don't have, yeah, this one has to have a discrete graphics card. Yeah, it says right on it, discrete graphics card required, just like the other one says it. So yeah, having an AMD CPU, like you mentioned, with graphics built in, would definitely be a better option, for sure. I didn't buy that chip with the intent for it to become what it has become. It just kind of worked out that way. I should have prefaced that. I bought the chip primarily to do a very inexpensive AMD build that I never got around to doing, and ended up using all the other parts, or I didn't get all the other parts. I don't remember anymore. But I've kept it on the shelf, and the only time I pull it out is for diagnostic work, so it's by default become my diagnostic CPU. And while having one with a built-in graphics chip would be more convenient, it's better than nothing, which is what most people have. If the graphics card that you're looking at by AMD ends in the letter G, the letter G usually means it's got built-in graphics on it. The letter X usually means you have to provide your own heat sink, as I recall. It may not be true. And that it needs its own graphics card. AMD, they just do things a little differently. That I don't work in enough quantity of AMD because of the problems, the time-consuming problems. So I'm definitely not an AMD expert by any means, nor do I care to be one. When they get to be easy, ubiquitous, much more affordable, available, reliable on both the boards, the RAM compatibility, yeah, all of that, I'll definitely consider more AMD builds. But for now, the only reason this is an AMD build is I had this motherboard laying around. And I said, what am I going to do with it? It's an X470. I've got that spare AMD CPU, but I didn't want to use it because I like to keep it now as a spare. So I went online to find out what the latest and greatest AMD CPU was for socket AM4 to pair with this motherboard. Then realized I'm going to need a power supply, I'm going to need RAM, I'm going to need a video card, I figured out today. I'm going to need a case, I'm going to need storage of some kind. And so because I have this spare motherboard laying around, I just had to spend, or I'm going to have to spend around $600 in parts for a system I don't even want. But I can't just have a good motherboard laying around. It's not increasing in value. And it's not as though somebody's going to bring me an AMD system where they need a motherboard swap out. Any AMD build should still have motherboards under warranty. So it doesn't seem worth having as a spare part for a diagnostic, in my opinion. Dennis says he thinks the last AMD processor that came with a cooler was a Ryzen 5 3800X that came with a nice Wraith cooler. Yeah, I don't know. Michael mentions that some X470 boards don't have the video output. This one does. It's got a single HDMI out. But obviously, if the motherboard doesn't provide that, it won't matter if your chip has a graphics on board or not, because you'll have no way to hook into it. So thank you for mentioning that. Atypical Male says 5600X has the Wraith Stealth, which is useless. It's better than nothing. Any other questions? Blackwatch contributes $5 Canadian. Thank you, Blackwatch. We've got about 495 people watching right now. And again, thank you all for tuning in and watching. Since this is all working good, what can I do? I could do some more stuff with it. I could throw an SSD and install Windows 10. That's kind of boring. You guys have seen me do that a million times. But at least I know what I have now. And then it can be sold or find a purpose. Now that I have a chip and a board and RAM, everything else is just plug and play with regards to if we're going to put a high-end graphics card or something low-end like what it's got. And then, of course, that will determine how big of a power supply I'll need. Probably throw it in a Corsair 200R case and call it a day. Atypical male says, Carey, I pretty much just collect Wraith stealths and use them for budget builds. Yeah, it's fine. Some people, you have to understand, in the world of technology and computers, there are different cliques or groups of people who prioritize different things on their computer. Some people, like a lot of times when you're in the forums or you're looking at YouTube tech channels, there's a lot of enthusiasts that care about their RGB and they care about their overclocking, and they have an obsession with cooling that you will not find outside of that relatively tiny little community. When you're dealing with anybody that's a home user calling you for help as a tech, or you're dealing in corporate America, the subject of system temperature may never come up in 10 years. The subject of RGB lighting or liquid cooling may never even breach a conversation. So that kind of stuff is well saturated here on YouTube, but not in real life. And I think that's pretty interesting, that the people who are the most technically abled are the ones talking, they're creating content online because they're technical people. So they're going to create technical content about stuff only technical people care about, except it misleads novices who don't realize these aren't regular people, that these are enthusiasts. And then it gets the novices to think that what these enthusiasts are talking about is actually important when it isn't. It's important to them, but they make up a tiny fraction of computer owners when you consider about 300 million computers are sold each year. 300 million a year. And of those computers sold, very small fraction of computers are enthusiasts. Most of them are going to businesses in corporate America to do actual work, and others go to consumers, end users, who just, maybe they're working remotely or the kids are learning remotely. Nobody's worried about overclocking. Nobody even understands frequency for the most part. They just know if it's fast and if it's cheap, and if they feel like they got a deal. They don't really understand it. They don't care to understand it. And if those people go into those forums, they're very easily misled into believing that what the enthusiasts care about is something they should also care about. And so I'm trying to counterbalance that and say, no, you don't need to worry about that stuff. If you're looking at winter hiking gear and you go on to a website or you're watching YouTube videos for people that are preparing to hike Mount Everest, the equipment that they're going to be recommending is way over the top for what you want to do. And their obsession over little teeny tiny things is important to them because apparently they have the budget for it, and they consider what they do more important than what you're doing. And that's the best way I can explain it to you, that there is no consideration that you would have the normal needs of an end user if you get into any dialogue or conversation with these content creators or forum posters who only see things with an enthusiast mindset and refuse to accept any other valid perspective, even to acknowledge that other valid perspectives exist. That's not why they're there. They're not there to help the novices unless those novices want to be enthusiasts. Then they'll help you. But if you just want an honest answer, they're going to skew that to what they feel is more important. But their priorities are very, very different from the common end user. And there's no problem with it, right? They're not doing anything wrong. It's just that there's so many of them online, for obvious reasons, they're technical people, that if you're a novice and you're using that as your sole source of information, you should not believe what you're being told is as important as people say it is, because it's coming from enthusiasts. And just arm yourself with that knowledge and do a little more research, because anybody who's making a big deal about temperature or about clock speeds or about XMP, these don't represent normal average computer owners, and no computer owner or corporate entity that I've ever worked for has ever brought those subjects up at all. It's just never happened. So to each his own, but please know, if you're a novice, that these differences exist. The problem is they don't know. They think all people that have computers are all on the same page. We are not. What one person prioritizes as important and will open a wallet up to spend lots of money on, another person absolutely will not. And they'll argue and fight over it on the internet. Don't let yourself get caught into that delusional madness, please. It's very unhealthy. I'm just looking through the chat here, so when I stand here silently staring there, that's what I'm doing. Anthony says, can someone give me some technical advice? Well, you'll have to ask your question, Anthony, and I'm sure if I don't address it, others in the chat will. We have a wonderful community here, and I always encourage everybody to help each other here rather than, put all of the responsibility on my shoulders or only having my opinion. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to advice, a lot of times there's no right or wrong. There's just different value systems. And you just pick the one that, or neither, or none. But obviously, if one aligns to your value system, when we don't know you and we don't know your value system, getting as much varying opinions is good for you to weigh and measure the decision that's right for you. George wants to know, Carey, is there a way to attach a Dell XPS 159570 to an external monitor via HDMI on a laptop that does not work? Well, if the laptop monitor isn't working, then yeah, you would just use the function key on the Dell to turn on the secondary monitor if you've given it enough time for Windows to load, because you can't see. The secondary monitor won't come on until Windows is loaded and you've activated it. Once you've activated it, it'll stay activated. But if the laptop doesn't work, it won't matter what monitor you plug into it. Planet Cryos contributes $5. Carey and chat will be popping in and out of here as a little something for your squirrel moments. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. John Williams says, good evening. Nice to see you once again from Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, John. Welcome in. Jackson Osborne wants to know, could I ever run a program like UE4 on one computer while a backup computer renders everything? Is that a software or hardware problem? That would be controlled in the software if it allows for off-putting rendering to another machine. I know some of the Synology NASs offer some video encoding and BitTorrenting and stuff being offloaded to them. Among other things. I don't know what UE4 is, so but there are some software packages that allow that, but that's in the software. Anthony Wilson said, I've been a tech for 14 years, and I've got an older Samsung that came in for repair. It should have been retired, but the customer is not well off. The system boots fine for Windows 7, but when you install Windows 10, it hangs on the Windows logo. Could be a failing storage drive or that it needs a BIOS update, if a BIOS update is available. Skyforce says, Carey, do you have an area in tech where you tend to overspend? For me, I always spend more on cases and cooling than what I really need. I have a strange addiction to flash drives. I have more flash drives than I will ever use. And like external storage, when it comes to M.2 enclosures, there's a history on this channel of me looking at all different kinds of external storage devices or adapters to house old storage you're not using anymore, like old SATA M.2s or old SATA hard drives or SSDs. I just can't seem to get enough of it. And then I buy them and I use them for about a week and then I never use them again. I end up always going back to these pocket-sized, super fast SanDisk Extreme Pro flash drives because they're just so convenient, they're so fast, and they're so small. All of the other enclosures, even for M.2, they're physically too big to conveniently stick in a pocket. And so I forget I have them. I just pulled out a Silverstone enclosure that I was really happy with. And I think I put a 2 terabyte M.2 drive in it. And I was back over at Studio A and I was looking at some of my old parts. And up on the shelf, I found this Sabrent M.2 to USB enclosure. And this thing is heavy. It's like a big metal heatsink. It's very heavy. And I want to say I put a 2 terabyte Intel NVMe in there. And I think I used it once and then I put it up on a shelf and never used it again. It's just not as convenient, as grabbing one of these, and these are now 1 terabyte. This is 2 terabytes, but it's 4 times the size. Although this is faster, it's just not as convenient. I don't like that I've got to remember to bring the cable. I've got to have the right cable. And it takes longer to initialize this drive than to initialize, I don't know why. Like when you plug it in and you're waiting for the system to make it available to use it, there's a longer delay and I'm impatient. But if I was gonna move 2 terabytes worth of stuff, I don't have a flash drive this small. The biggest one, this small that holds 2 terabytes, the biggest one is 1 terabyte. And this will write the data faster. So if I'm writing that much data, I want to do it as quick as possible. But then I forget I have this. I've got the Samsung T5, that's a 1 terabyte. It's just as inconvenient, so I don't use it. So if I tend to overspend on anything, to answer your question, it's on external storage devices. I have some weird obsession with finding the perfect one. And even though I raved about how great this was, it was a good price, it was easy to use, I just don't use it in reality. And that's kind of like benchmarks, right? We can look at benchmarks all day and see how a system performs in synthetic simulations. But how does it perform in everyday life? How do you feel using it? It's sort of like if you were driving a car and I told you this car had a lot of power, but you didn't feel like it had a lot of power. And I can put it on a dyno and I can show you how much horsepower it's got and prove it to you. Look at the benchmarks on this car. It's got, 800 horsepower. But you get in the car and you put your foot down and it just, you're just not feeling it. To me, how you feel is more important than what the benchmarks tell you. And I see too many people flip it the other way, where they're not happy with their computer unless the benchmarks are at a certain result. I don't understand that. It doesn't make any sense to me. If I'm happy with my computer's performance, there's no benchmark that's going to change my mind. Furthermore, if I'm unhappy with my computer's performance, there's no benchmark that's going to change my mind. But there's a whole group of people out there online that base how they're going to feel about their computer on the results of benchmarks. And I guess because I'm a logical businessman, that's not something I can sell. And it's not something I would want to sell, to convince people that they should prioritize synthetic simulations over reality. I don't know why people do that, but to each his own, I guess. Go Shadow says, I'm a data hoarder. Main system has 4 8 terabyte drives, 1 terabyte NVMe, 2 terabyte SSD, and he says, I'm running out of room. I have a Raspberry Pi media server with 4 more 8 terabyte drives, has all my movies, music, and manuals. See, all that stuff can be downloaded online or streamed online. That's a very old school methodology to think you have to hoard movies, TV shows, music, or even manuals. Honestly, it's all out there online, available anytime you want it, anywhere. You can leave your drives at home, connect up your laptop or use a computer at an internet cafe, sign into your accounts and stream whatever you want to stream. Even a hotel TV, you could stream what you need to stream from your Hulu accounts or your Netflix accounts. And you don't need to have all that data being stored. It's already being stored for you. But it's what you enjoy doing, and makes you feel good, you're a collector of sorts, you're not hurting anything. I find it interesting when I see people have more money invested backing up their movies than what the movies would cost if they would pay the $1.99 or whatever, if it's like a rental, when they wanted to watch them. I find a lot of people have DVDs and VHS tapes of entire television series that they just don't watch. But I guess it makes them feel good to have them. But again, just a different philosophy. Ben Stroud said Micro Center has a Ryzen 7 5800X and B550 motherboards and Ryzen 5 5600X on sale, $20 off each if you buy the CPU and the motherboard together. I mean, I don't know how much $20 is when you're dropping $700 on a chip and board. To me, that doesn't seem like, it's not even 10%. It's not even 5% of a discount. Sometimes there's coupons that you get in the mail that say 10 cents off your next purchase. I'm not going to, it's worth 10 cents more of my time to cut the coupon than the coupon. Plus, to bring the coupon, remember to use the coupon for 10 cents, it's an insult. To me, it's not worth my time. So 20 bucks when you're dropping, $500, $700. Now, if I'm spending 80 bucks and I'm going to get 20 bucks off, that's a good discount. I'll do that. Saeed says, Carey, would you recommend anyone who is interested become a computer technician to go after it in this time? In the time when there's more computers on the planet than ever in the history of mankind? Why wouldn't I? Why would you not want to be a computer technician when cybersecurity issues are reaching all-time highs, cryptocurrency in its usage is growing and expanding beyond all imaginable dreams and projections, and at 300 million computers a year for the last 15 years, there are now more computers in the world than there ever has been. So why would you not want to be a computer tech in this day and time? How much better could it get for you? Carey, will default BIOS setting allow CPU graphic and add-on graphics cards to be used at the same time? For example, use both outputs from the board and card with 2 monitors. Well, that may vary. One manufacturer's BIOS defaults may not be the same as another manufacturer's BIOS defaults. In fact, they rarely are the same. There's no rules or laws that govern how BIOS defaults are defined. But that's an easy thing for you to discover on your own. Try it and see, and let me know. Blackwatch with a $2 Canadian contribution says, for your information, I think the next minor update is 2.1H1. Okay, what I say before, 20H2 instead of 20, I can't remember. We're still waiting on that. Yeah. Michael's saying no one wants to buy a PC without a graphics card. You and I have very different customers. 90% of my customers do not want to buy a graphics card. Even if I could get them for $10, they wouldn't want it. They want the system to be built with as few components as possible for less to go wrong, fewer issues with any compatibility issues or driver-related issues. The majority of my work comes from corporate America, from businesses. And businesses aren't playing games. I mean that both literally and figuratively. My clients want good, reliable, fast computers that are not going to break their bank, but aren't going to be obsolete anytime soon. And in order to achieve that goal, we need to put in as few components as possible so that we have fewer components that can break. We simplify the builds, which increases their reliability, also by using name brand parts, not the cheapest things we can scour from the depths of the abyss known as the internet. And their productivity is increased and profits are increased as a result of meeting those margins. Now, for home users, if you're mostly dealing with home users, that may be a different case where somebody wants to do gaming. But it's few and far between that I build a computer for a gamer. It just doesn't, it's not really business I want. And the reason for that is those are the people that are going to be your technical support nightmares in my experience. Those are the people who are going to create problems. And those are the people who are going to be more likely to have problems because of how they use the machine. And since support is a cost center for me, and I make such little money on my builds, it's not worth it to me to engage in that. For the most part, I make exceptions. There are gaming computers I build for people from time to time, but it's not my normal business. Now, there are other reasons I may install graphics for businesses, for AutoCAD or other forms of rendering. And if that's the case, again, it's not normal. If they order 20 computers from me for an office, only 1 or 2 of them would be for the employees that need that kind of work done on those computers, and everybody else will be doing Word, Excel, PowerPoint, email, Quicken, QuickBooks, tax software. I'll give you an example. You go to the dentist office, your dentist probably has a computer screen in front of the dental chair. And that's more than likely hooked up to some Dell or HP, pre-built that does not have a discrete graphics card. The dentist may have 14 individual operatories in one office, needing 14 computers, 14 monitors, plus they need a server, plus the receptionist, and other people that might be booking appointments need computers, and they need to be able to get into the appointment calendar, the scheduler. They need to check email. They need to pull up x-rays. They need to pull up your, in this case, Dentrix software with your history, your dental history with them, any notes they take, and that's critical to their business. And so rather than sell one computer to some gamer, I can sell 14, 15, 16 computers to one dental office, and I can make a lot more money and not have any of the support issues. So it's about smarter business, right? But it's a decision I've made on how I want to run my business. If I wanted to pursue gamers as a business model, I'd have to work a lot harder to find those clientele, unless I found myself surrounded by gamers and I was like, hey, I build computers, and word get out in that community and they all wanted me to build them one. But if there's anybody more likely than not to build their own machine, it's a gamer. So even if I do build one for a gamer, chances are they're going to want to build their next one themselves. And I think it's great. But no business has ever said, hey, we're going to start building our own now. That has never, ever happened in the history that I've been doing this. So business brings me more work more often, resulting in more profit, less support calls. And it's easy for me to find the work. They're practically begging. So in some circumstances, it's so hard to find technicians now. I've had companies just like, if you can't do it, can you recommend somebody who can, because we can't find anybody. And I'm always very, very cautious about recommending anybody because I'm not making any money on it. And if that person screws up, it reflects poorly on me. So as a liability concern, in general, I do not recommend others in a professional, phone call from a prospective client. So again, there's a lot of things that I take into account I think a lot of enthusiasts don't consider. And I think it's an important distinction, because if you want to make money at this, in my opinion, the best way is to have a steady income of steady work. And that's where corporate America comes in. They will keep you busy. End users, they only call you when they have a problem, and usually they've had the problem for a very long time, and it's been gradually getting worse and worse and worse until they couldn't stand it anymore. And then they're going to call you, and then they want you to fix it right away, and they want it cheap, and then they're going to call you with 17 million questions over the course of the next 6 weeks. You're welcome to have all that work. If you want to, you will not receive any competition from me. It's all yours. You can have it. Take it. Michael says, I appreciate your input and views. Hey, that's all it is. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just explaining why I do what I do and why I avoid certain things. It is an attempt for me to continue to be a sustainable operational business. Sometimes they're not things I want to do, they're things I have to do. And until you find yourself in that situation of running a sustainable business, you may not fully grasp exactly the meaning of what I'm telling you until you find yourself there. Maybe. Ghost Shadow mentions IT customer nightmare is a tax preparer that procrastinates and then calls you the day before taxes are due. That systems need to get fixed that day. I'm not aware of any professional tax preparers that behave that way. I have several tax preparers as clients, and none of them behave that way. None of them. What they will do is I may recommend an upgrade for them. But during tax season, which is from here in America, January 1st until April 15th, and it was April 17th, and now it's May 17th, I think, they don't want anything to be done to their computers because during that time, they're getting busier. As they approach the tax deadline, things get busier and busier, and their days get longer and longer. Instead of spending 8-hour days, they're spending 10-hour days, 12-hour days, 14-hour days. Usually, they want me to make their backups more frequently because we usually do it once a week. And because they're doing so much data input and data entry, especially that last month before the tax deadline, that losing one day of work can cause some serious problems. So usually they'll say, we're going to postpone any upgrades. We're going to deal with whatever problems we've got, and we're going to wait until the end of tax season. And then as soon as that's done, we'll authorize you to do whatever you need to do. That's the most common attitude I see. Also, I've found that most tax or accountants don't like any change. If we're going from Windows 7 to Windows 10, they don't like it. If we're going from Word 2003 to Word 2019, oh my gosh, this is horrible. They do not, in general, from my experience and my anecdotal personal experience, don't like the change. It was fine before. Why did they have to change it? I see a lot of that with tax preparers, accountants, CPAs, that sort of thing. Not all of them, but it's if there's ever a time I'm going to hear a complaint that something is new, it's the percentage of people who complain about it being new and different. If you go from career to career to career, from lawyers to doctors to CPAs, it's the CPAs overall who don't like the change. They're very resistant to it. Can't help it. The internet's evolving. You either evolve with it or you get left behind. And since you're dealing with people's private financial information, social security numbers, and other identifiable information, you are doing your customers and your business a disservice by holding on to the past, in my opinion. And I don't want my company associated with a company that behaves that way, because they'll blame the IT person. The next thing they're going to do is point blame. When something happens, when there's a data breach or there's a ransomware, didn't we have an IT guy? Why did he allow this to happen? Well, if you're hiring me as your managed service provider, there are certain non-negotiable things we have to do to your network to lock it down. And if you don't like that change, I'm not your guy, because those changes are necessary to secure your network and your data and your computers. And if you hire me, you need to trust me. I'm not going to tell you to do something you don't need to do. At the same time, I'm not going to accept liability for somebody telling me how to do my job. For any reason, we don't like it, we can't afford it, then fine, you can't afford me. I'm not going to allow you to damage my company and my brand because you made decisions that then hurt you and then blame me for it because I should have warned you more, or I should have twisted your arm more, or I should have done better to convince you. It's always going to be my fault. They're going to be so upset at their loss, they won't even realize what they're saying. They oftentimes absolutely refuse to accept accountability for the consequences of their decisions. And that's maddening. For me, it's maddening for somebody to say that I had control over their decision, and therefore their decision was my fault. The only time that should be an issue is if they do everything I tell them to do, and then they still get infected, or they still get hacked, or there's still a data leak. Now that's on me. But if you didn't do what I told you to do, or you didn't give me permission and authorize me to implement the changes that I deemed were necessary, then I don't want to work for you, because that's what's going to happen to me. It's not going to work out good for either one of us. And whatever little bit amount of money that I would make from a client who thinks that way, they would never become a big client because they think that way. So I'm not losing much by walking away from them. If anything, I'm gaining. I'm cutting my losses before it gets worse. You don't make money from all clients. Some clients are going to cost you money. And the sooner you can recognize them, the more profitable your business is going to be. And that may mean some people don't like you, but they just don't have the understanding of running a business to understand what they're asking for is unreasonable, and the consequences can be very damaging. It's not just them that's affected now. Now they're dragging you into that mess. Well, you're not dragging me. That's the benefit of being self-employed, is being able to walk away from some jobs where you can just see this is not going to end well, so we're not going to start. Good luck to you. I hope you find a tech that can help you, that will do what you want them to do, and I wish you the best. No hard feelings. Don't want to get involved. Zadravko says, I just want to say hello because I need to prepare for work. Hey, Zadravko, good to see you, my friend. Christopher Vanzetta says, I once had a client who makes millions in real estate who had a problem with an Apple tax program not printing thousands of pages in one batch. And my solution was to print 100 pages at a time. Yeah. I've encountered situations like that many, many years ago where the printing batch was too large. I haven't seen that problem in a long time. And I also saw where people would accidentally send 100 print jobs to a printer that wasn't printing. So they keep trying again and again and again. And then the worst thing is you don't clear the print buffer out. I get focused on solving the problem, and then the printer's online, and then boom, starts sending out pages, and I have to cancel, but it's already buffered like 100 pages, and I got to turn the printer off mid-print, which causes a paper jam. It's important to get the order right. Yeah. It's been a while since I've had to deal with that. Randall wants to know what I offer as an MSP. So if I'm your MSP, I'm basically your IT department, your entire IT department. That means if you're installing a new computer, I'm installing the new computer, not you. If you're going to be buying a new piece of hardware, you should, though you're not required, check with me. Unless you're planning on calling somebody else if it doesn't go well. You should depend on me to provide your antivirus software. You should depend on me to provide all the updates to Windows on your computers. You should rely on me to perform all the server maintenance. You should rely on me to perform all the backups and to ensure that the backups are being made on the frequency in which you're paying me and they're being done by a human being and not automated. You are paying me essentially to be your entire networking department with some exceptions. I don't do any VoIP and I no longer run any network lines. I will make an exception now and again if it's something simple I can get done. But as far as, hey, we've got a network here, we want it tuned up, we want it optimized, we want it secured, we want things backed up, we want all the computers secured, we want the computers to be, make sure they don't run out of hard drive space. We want to identify problems before they occur and ideally put in processes so that the problems never happen. And I do all of that as the managed service provider. I take care of the entire IT department. What somebody wishes to provide as an MSP is entirely up to them. They could provide even more or less than what I do. And that's for each business owner to decide on their own, which may be dictated by your clients, right? There's certain clients that are going to be more prone to doing some things themselves. And that seems to be fairly regional and also sometimes specific to an industry. Can I recommend a good budget PC? No, I don't think there's any good budget PC as far as if we're talking about any PC under $500 that's new, none of them are good. I wouldn't sell a computer for $500 because it could damage my reputation and it could cost my company a lot of money in support costs, in reliability, or even in the end users who are in that sort of financial frame. They're generally not the most technical people, generally speaking. There's always exceptions, but they tend to require more support. So those people who are wanting to buy the budget PCs are the ones who most certainly should not be. You might want to look at buying an off-lease computer, as long as you're not looking for gaming, or you might look into buying a used, somebody's who's an enthusiast who perhaps is a gamer, and now their machine, is 6 months old, it's not good enough for them anymore. You can sometimes find those deals. A lot of times I find people ask way too much money, again, in my opinion, for their used computers. If you look on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, I see people selling $300 computers for $700. And I just shake my head going, what world are they living in? But all it takes is one person to buy it, right? Could have 1,000 people look at that ad. Just takes one person who says, I'll buy it. Not my problem. How those people sleep at night, I don't know. But if you know what you're looking for and you know a deal when you spot it, it also helps that you know somebody. A lot of my friends get parts from their other friends who upgraded. Hey, I got my 1080 graphics card because my friend upgraded and he sold it to me for $100 or he gave it to me. That's how I see a lot of people with very limited income getting themselves better computers, not just going online and finding somewhere cheap, because you're going to get what you pay for it. You buy a $500 computer, you're going to get a $500 computer if you're buying it new. And there's some real crap out there, some real big crap. You go to Walmart and buy some crap there. You can go online at Newegg. There's a bunch of companies building gaming PCs right now that, well, just do a search here on YouTube at the Dell gaming PCs that people have been reviewing, the Walmart gaming PCs. And these folks on YouTube are just shaking their heads going, this thing is horrible. MSI, I just saw one the other day. A guy did a video on an MSI pre-built gaming PC that he was warned not to buy it. And he bought it to see why everybody is warning him not to buy it. He found out why. But it's on a budget and it was cheap, so you get what you pay for. Save your money, that's what I'd say, so that you don't have to buy a budget PC. Stop needing everything today. Be more patient, put away some money, do some side hustle jobs so you can make a few extra bucks, put the money away, and when you have $700, $800, you can buy yourself a really nice computer that will last 8 years without a problem. And if you're looking for a way to make extra money on the side, right here in YouTube, just type in side hustle. And there's lots of people that'll teach you about how you can make money, and how to save your money and how to invest your money. The typical attitude is, I've got money, I need to spend it. And that's just a bad attitude. It's not sustainable unless you're rich. So you'll just be always working to make more money to buy the next thing you want. Instead, you need to slow down, be more patient, sacrifice a little bit so that you can have a much bigger payoff at the end that will be much more valuable to you. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and I sacrificed a lot. What I was told growing up is you can have pretty much anything you want in the world, but you can't have everything. You can be anybody you want to be, but you can't be everything you want to be. You're going to have to sacrifice things you don't want as much in order to get the thing you want more. Or you can scrape the bottom of the barrel and just get the cheapest budget version of everything in your life. And that is a vicious cycle. It'll just keep you at the bottom of the barrel to the day you die. I know that cycle quite well, and I will not go back. I'm not going back to that. That's a horrible way to live. In a sense, it was a good way because it taught me, it motivated me. But once you get out of that terrible scraping the barrel, once you get out of that, even just raise yourself up an inch above the bottom of that barrel, trust me, life gets so much less stressful. Things just work a lot better, and you feel better about what you own. You have a lot more pride of ownership because you really worked for it and sacrificed for it. And again, it's not to say you've got to get the most expensive thing. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying stop looking at the cheapest. The cheapest is a horrible goal. Let me see how far into the bottom I can go. That seems like an odd thing to brag about. I can go lower than you can go. I don't understand the mentality. So, not the guy to ask that question to. So if you got 300 or any money, if it's urgent, get whatever best you can. And I have a head start. If you took $300 and you invested it in Bitcoin in January, you'd have about $1,000 today. So from January, February, March, April, so 4 months of just ignoring the money, pretend you don't have it, you would have tripled your money just by buying some Bitcoin. Granted, you got to pay taxes on that, but regardless, it beats whatever you had to do to get the first 300. When you learn how to make your money work for you, then you can't help but think, well, geez, if I made 300 into 1,000, what if I had 3,000? Then it'd be 9,000. If I had 10,000, it'd be 30,000. If I had 30,000, it'd be 90,000. If I had 90,000, it'd be 270,000. And you can see how addictive it is. Now, suddenly it becomes more enjoyable to start seeing that money get bigger and bigger. Because the minute you pull it out and it stops earning, you're right back to zero again. So it's a very interesting change of perspective that once you experience it, I don't think you're going to want to let it go. You're going to say, I never worked so easily in my life. And when you can do these side hustles, that again, here on YouTube, just type in the word side hustles, and you'll see people talking about ways that they turned $1 into $1,000 in a month. Watch those videos to give yourself ideas for what seems like something that you wouldn't mind doing. I'm just looking through the chat. Christopher G contributes $5. Thank you, Christopher. Yes, mods, please don't undo another mod's work. If you want to bring it to my attention, allow me to make that judgment call. But I appreciate you guys are looking out for me. I do appreciate your taking care of disruption. How's my connection been today? How are we doing? I had a few drop frames, but I'm on a different connection now. That connection sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. Tonight, it's working, so I'm happy about that. And the board is working. I'm happy about that. I'm on a roll. I should keep going. Well, things are going my way. See what else I can bring up here that's something I can fix since I'm having such good odds tonight. I mentioned Bitcoin only because as far as investments go, it's something that's got a very high return. Of course, there's always risk in any investment, but the same goes when you spend your money, anything you're spending it on is an investment. And those investments often offer you very low return. Buying a car is always going to bring you severe depreciation. It's a bad investment. Few exceptions to that, but overall it's a bad investment. And it's a lot of money. When you buy food, you have to eat, but then you don't have anything after that. So you gotta go get some more food, which costs some more money. You can leave it in the bank, but it's gonna result in a very low interest rate. If you want to play in Wall Street, do like an S&P 500 index fund, those average 10% returns annually. Then there's very low risk, but it's going to take you a longer time to get there when something is more risky, like Bitcoin. To me, it's not risky. I have a perspective where I understand where the value is. I think a lot of financial investors don't really understand it. And it would be wrong for them to recommend something they don't understand. But it would be nice if they simply said, I don't understand it, so I don't have an opinion. But their opinion is, since I don't understand it, I don't recommend it. But Bitcoin can never be shut down. You'd have to basically turn off the internet. No government can shut it down. There's a limited number of Bitcoins, I think 21 million. There'll never be any more than that. So as more and more people start to adopt it, each coin goes up in value because there's a limited supply. As demand goes up, just like with graphics cards, supply is down, demand is up, price goes up. And I only see cryptocurrency going up and up and up, especially as younger generations get older and they're making international purchases with different currency forms and not having to worry about currency transaction fees or translating what 5 Canadian dollars is to US dollars. Now, if it's this much of a Bitcoin, it's the same price no matter where you are. It's that much of a Bitcoin without any translation required. And as the world keeps getting smaller with the internet, China was something very rarely discussed as a child growing up in the 70s, as a teenager in the 1980s. We were worried about Russia, sending over nuclear bombs. We were worried about, the Cold War. But now with the internet and the world getting smaller, conversations with companies and transactions with companies out of China are commonplace, everyday things for all of us. And so to transfer income or currency back and forth, Bitcoin is a lot easier to do that with for a number of reasons. And I think the younger generation is going to embrace it heavily, and I think its value is going to skyrocket. I could be wrong, but a lot of people say things like, I wish I would have bought that Microsoft stock back when it was, 1989 or whatever, or Yahoo, or any of these large companies where people go, I wish I would have ... So to earn money that way, to me, is a lot more appealing than actually doing work. But I also think it's less risky than going to a casino. I am not a good gambler, not good at all. So if I go to a casino, I'll probably make $100 my spending limit, and I will probably go through it in about 10 minutes and I'll be done. I will lose it quickly. Dogecoin is like what, 7 cents? If you bought $1 worth of Dogecoin and sat on it, it might one day be worth $1. So if you had $1 worth at 7 cents, that's now worth $1. How many did you buy? How many Dogecoins could you buy for $1? But that's not going to happen overnight. But you'll be so glad if that happens that you put that $1 in and took that risk. Peter Laycock, my friend, contributes 50 pounds, says, good morning, Carey and everyone in the chat, from a cold Bonnie, Scotland, where it's a -1 degree Celsius. Ooh, that sounds a little bit chilly. Hey, Peter, good to see you. Thank you so much for your continued support. Carey, have you ever used disk to VHD, virtual hard drive? If so, any tips or use cases for it? No, I've not used it, but I'm told you can make an Acronis image like a virtual hard drive and load it into a virtual machine, which could have some good use cases. But for me and my clients, we don't have any need for it. I don't like the taxing on the system that occurs in a virtual machine. It runs too slow for me. But I'm impatient, and most of my clients are pretty impatient too. And when we add those additional steps, we try and find another solution. If I was a software developer, a virtual hard drive would be critical. Or if I was a security expert, running virtual hard drives and virtual machines would be critical. But that's not what I do, so those things are not important to me. Aaron Computer Tech says, Carey, if you need a remote tech in the Tampa area, let me know. Wouldn't it be great if we were all at the same experience level and I could safely recommend you without worrying that you know what you're doing or don't know what you're doing, or you say what you're going to do, you show up on time, that you do a good job, you charge a fair rate, it doesn't take you too long. I don't recommend people, and I think it's nice that people offer. I don't know you, so I don't know the quality of your work if it stands up to my standards, or even if it exceeds I just don't know. Because I don't know, I just don't get involved. But if we were to work together and I got to know you and see your work habits, then and only then would that become an option. I've had a number of people offer to, yeah, I know you're busy, I can help you. I don't know you. I'm not going to send you thousands of dollars worth of components or send you to a client representing me. I don't even know who you are. I mean, I know you're cool because you're watching my channel, but cool ain't gonna cut it in the business world. You gotta be good at what you do. You gotta show up on time. You gotta say what you mean what you say, be a man of your word or person of your word. I don't care if you're a man or a woman, doesn't matter to me. Don't take 4 hours to do a 1 hour job and charge a fair rate. And everybody will say, that's what I do. I don't know that. I'd have to see it with my own eyes. Mortmont says he recommends people that he has worked with. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Exactly. When you get to know somebody, like you've worked with them, you get an idea of their work ethic. You probably work with people that you don't recommend too. I'll bet you. James wants to know if that's an NZXT Z73 cooler in the streaming computer. It's a Z63. The Z73 is bigger. This is a 280 millimeter all-in-one liquid cooler. Our friend in the chat, Selden Bell, made the animated GIF that's running. We can put the focus on there if we want. Just zoom that in a little bit. Even maybe just turn this a little. My shirt's gonna fall down. I haven't got an update on the shirts yet, guys. I'm still trying to get some computers out of here first. I appreciate everybody's patience. I've got an update. I'm gonna be doing this review of this Orico portable SSD. This is a 1 terabyte version. It's kind of funky looking. And as soon as I get some time, I will remove the cellophane from the package and run some benchmarks on it. See if it performs better than the last portable storage we had from Orico. If you remember, I ended up putting it into it got so hot that data transfer rate dropped severely. And I ended up getting a glass, filling it with ice and sticking the SSD in the ice. And it cooled it down, but it still didn't improve its performance. It was still pretty bad. I think I've backed that camera off too far. I'm probably going to be really tiny. Yeah, now I got all this space over my head. That's why I need a camera operator. Dennis wants to know what CPU I have in the streamer. This is my birthday build. If you search my YouTube channel and look for my birthday build, that is a Core i9 9900KS processor with the Trident G.skill RAM. Each one of those sticks is 16 gigs of RAM, so there's 64 gigs of RAM. There's an RTX 3070 in there, which I just added. I had a 2080 Ti in there before that. And a Samsung 970 EVO plus 2 terabyte NVMe SSD. So when it came to me building a computer for my needs, I wanted something I could show off on camera that was also going to have the power to stream, that was also not going to be loud, but was also going to have the power to do video editing up to 4K with no problems, no sweat. And I wanted a case that was elegant but not flashy. And so I ended up with a Fantex N-Through case here. I'm very happy with my decision. It suits my personality, my needs. $4,300 in a budget, but it was for my birthday. So I justified it. It's an investment in the YouTube channel. And look how much attention it gets. So it was worth doing. A lot of people see that spinning cube and they're just drawn to it. So that, as a business decision, was the right thing to do. Anything that can attract your attention and cause you to want to know more, to interact on YouTube, that's how you grow. That's how you get more viewers, and that's how you get people, what else has this guy got? We have some really cool computer builds here for that reason alone. The round computer I did last week, the big robot's foot computer with all the RGB, the big helicopter case, the little helicopter case, the Xenos build. You're going to see builds here you're just not going to see anywhere else. And further, the way I build them is often unlike other people. You're not going to see any custom liquid cooling here. Everything I do, you can do. Everything I do, you can do. That's my goal, is to show you how easy this stuff is. And even if it looks fancy, trust me, it's just a money problem. It's not a problem of technical knowledge. You know, whether I build a $4,300 computer or I'm just putting together a motherboard, you know, it's the same skill set. It's just a different budget. And it's something anybody can do if you want to. X246 says, my precious, right? Any final questions? I will wrap it up on this one. We just reached 2 hours on the live stream. It's pretty good on a Sunday. We got about 450 people watching live, and I'm glad that you've all decided to hang out with me tonight. And I enjoy interacting with you guys, and I enjoy watching you guys interact with each other. But if there's any questions for me, speak now, or you'll have to just wait till next time. Joseph Hawkins says, I remember the Cosmos one you had, Carey. Yeah, that was back in 2013. That was 8 years ago. We did the Cosmos 2 build. That case is by far the largest computer case I have ever worked on to this day. And I couldn't lift it by myself. Once everything was installed in it, it took me and the person who owns it together to lift that up. And that computer, the Cosmos, came back about 4 years later with, it was overheating. The whole top of the case was getting hot, and the liquid cooler had died, which I predicted would happen in 4 or 5 years, and it was 4 years, just like I predicted. They didn't know what was wrong with it, but they trusted me, so they brought it back to me. They're local, and from what he described, knowing it was a liquid cooler, I said, yeah, it's probably a liquid cooler. It was. Ordered a new one, put it in. He wanted another liquid cooler, knowing you're only going to get 4 or 5 years out of them. He's fine with it. And then it was in and out of here in like 3 days. It was a quick fix. I like those. And as far as I know, customer is still happy. I have to assume if they had any problems, they'd be calling me and bringing it back. As far as I know, that computer is still in use today, 8 years later, still going strong. Those are, again, these kind of builds, they're not about flash. They're not about RGB. They're not about anything fancy. Instead, they're about a computer that's going to last a really long time. And so we're still running the original motherboard, original processor, original RAM, and original storage on that computer. Everything's original, even the power supply. Nothing is broken because they're good quality parts. We weren't scraping the bottom of the barrel. And he bought that case, that Cosmos case, he bought it refurbished, quote unquote refurbished. It had 2 sets of hardware, like they mispackaged it. That had duplicates of screws and adapters and stuff, which was clearly a mistake. And he said that he looked it all over, and there's no, it's advertised as dented or scratched merchandise, but there was no dent or scratch anywhere on it. So he got a really good deal on that case. I notice there's some people in the chat room that have issues with the mods, but these people are not behaving as guests should behave when you're invited into some place. The content that I provide for viewers is free, and everybody's invited as a guest to enjoy the content. But if you think you have some First Amendment right to free speech or whatever it is that you think makes it okay to be disrespectful in somebody else's home as a guest, you're going to not be happy here. Because if you don't automatically behave respectfully as a guest, then you will be asked to leave or timed out in a corner until you get the hint. So if you're saying, hey, I don't like the mods, so I'm going to leave, then you don't belong here. My mods are making sure that people are behaving respectfully as the guests that they are for free content. And while I'm happy that you want to check out my content, your criticism of it is not welcome. I didn't ask for it. And again, if I invite you into my house and you want to insult the color of the paint on the walls or the carpet or the couch or the furniture, get out of my house. I don't need you in the house, right? But on the other hand, I assume everybody's nice and everybody will be respectful, and therefore I invite everybody in. But there's some people who come in and think they own the place. Well, those people, they can get out. We won't miss them. So thank you to my friends in blue for keeping it civil in the chat room tonight. Well, there have been some folks who are unfamiliar with being respectful and common courtesy. Some people are just not going to learn. And we were doing fine without them since I started this YouTube in 2008, and we will continue to do fine without them. We'll see who lasts longer. So I appreciate my friends in blue watching my back. It's not so if I walk into your house and I tell you and I insult you or the things and the items in your house, and you tell me to get out of your house, that's not censorship. Censorship applies to when a citizen is critical of their government. That's all censorship is. A private industry has the right to protect their business. If you go into Disneyland with an offensive t-shirt on with swear words on it, or Mickey Mouse, exposing his middle finger, Disneyland will require you to change your shirt or to leave the park with no refund. That's not censorship. That's just good business. It's a family-friendly atmosphere, and they're not there for you to express your freedoms. They're there for you to participate as a guest. Even though you're paying, you're still a guest. And this misunderstanding of what censorship is disheartening to me, because censorship is a very critical, serious nature when citizens have issues with their government. But with private industry, each private industry decides how they want to handle business. And if you don't like it, you can take your business somewhere else. You can even start your own business. Nobody can tell you how to run your business. They can't tell you you're censoring. They can't. It's not up to them to tell you that. And if they don't like it, there's nothing they can do. They have no authority and they have no power, so they can go bite sand. Where censorship would apply is if you have a YouTube account, you can make your own YouTube videos. And if YouTube says you can't make these videos that you're talking badly about the president or the police or some other government entity, that would be a concern for censorship. But coming onto somebody else's channel to voice whatever on your mind, you don't have that right. You're a guest, you have no authority here, and you will be asked to leave if you refuse to show the common courtesy that everybody else here shows. This isn't about you. Nobody really cares. This is about the community. When you care more about yourself than the community, we won't miss you when you're gone. The community was here before, the community will be here after. If you choose to be a part of it and to behave in a civil manner in the way the rest of the community behaves, we would love to have you. I'd love to see the community grow. But if you think it's always about you and what you think matters, and that you have a right to be critical and everybody cares what you think about things that you weren't asked about, you're going to find this to be a very unpleasant experience here, and probably a short-lived one. And if you don't like that, create your own YouTube channel. That's where your freedom is. Your freedom isn't here. It's on your channel. My freedom is on my channel. Just like my house. You can't come in here and tell me how to decorate. Get out of my house. This isn't your house. You have no right. You have no authority. Now, when you go get some authority, you come let me know. It's a shame we even have to have these discussions. I assume everybody's parents raised them properly, but I guess not. The fact that you'd have to tell a grown adult how to behave respectfully as an invited guest seems like a preposterous conversation outside of an elementary school. So I don't understand why that's even up for discussion. It should be common sense. And the proof is in the authority, right? I have the ability to ban you. You don't have the ability to ban me because it's not your channel. If I was on your channel and you didn't like me, things I was saying, you could ban me for any reason you want, any reason at all. And there's nothing you can do about it. Well, there's one thing you can do about it, and that is start your own channel. But that would actually require effort more than just complaining and critiquing and criticizing. I don't know why we live in a culture where everybody thinks it's important for everybody to know what their critique is. Unless they were asked, who cares? Makes no sense to me. I blame Siskel and Ebert for starting a trend, but these folks were, Siskel and Ebert were professional movie critics. They weren't just, people saying, I'm going to tell you what I think of this movie, when you know nothing about the whole process and all of the underlying tones that were said in the movie and the messages, because it went right over your head. So you want to make sure you let everybody know how ignorant you are. It is a weird world that this has become. But at least here on the channel, we have some control to keep it normal, to keep it civil, to keep it respectful. Not only for ourselves, but for each other. It's important that we're all equal here. And it's important that we show the same courtesy that we would show to our own family members. And it's important that we maintain friendships and not adversaries in this environment. And if somebody wants to come in and stir the pot here, I think they're going to be very disappointed at the outcome because they're not going to be here very long. And yet at the same time, we've had people here in the chat, in the community, for years and years and years, and have never once stirred the pot. Why? Why does one person think that that's okay and another person thinks it's unacceptable? And the only excuse I can come up with is one person was raised with better parents. I don't know any other excuse for it. So since I can't raise these people, it's too late. We ban them because they have nothing to offer the channel at that point. If that's all you're bringing is your negativity and your criticisms, we were doing fine without that. Kevin Smith says, it's been so long since I've tuned in. What happened to the famous kitchen? Did you move? I have what would be best described as an office that I'm trying to broadcast from. The kitchen was too limiting, especially with COVID. Just didn't have the whole place to myself anymore to film. So I had to find a secondary location. If things change, I'll go back to the kitchen. If they don't change, I'll stay here as long as I can. And if this place becomes unavailable, I'll have to find somewhere else. GW Ison's asking me a question that doesn't matter, like who cares? I'm sorry, I don't care what. I wouldn't even pay attention to that. I wouldn't even give it the time of day. So I suggest you do the same. And again, I would say to the mods, if you're having to defend yourself in the chat, I'm going to ask you not to engage those folks. That's what they're hoping to do. They're baiting you. What a troll does, a true troll, doesn't cause a harm to you, what they do is they get you to engage in a conversation to constantly defend yourself, and that you voluntarily take that is very humorous to them. So the best way to handle that is to just ignore them, like the rest of all the other mods are doing. I would recommend you just ignore them. If they do something that's vulgar or inappropriate, they can be timed out or banned. But if what they're doing is just trying to poke you with a stick, stop reacting to it unless you want to be somebody's puppet and let them pull your strings. That's your consent. You're doing that willfully and voluntarily and engaging and feeding these trolls. I'm recommending you stop. Just ignore them. They'll get bored and go away. Larry Wood said he's missing the boys. Yeah, Lyle and Jimmy, they're doing well. I do hope to get back to the kitchen, and you'll see the dogs and everything at least once in a while. It's not going to be a regular thing until this pandemic is dealt with. But for now, at least I have a secondary location where you'd be seeing a lot less videos from me. When are you coming back to Michigan? I generally go to Michigan every fall for a few weeks. As far as permanently moving, I don't know. I'm still sort of in the very early stages of finding out where I can go, what it's going to cost, and how I'm going to get there. But I would say 18 to 24 months if everything goes well, for me to be permanently in Michigan, where I'm from, back home. And then I would have a home with a basement that would be a permanent studio location regardless of COVID. What's happened with the scenario wouldn't happen in Michigan because this basement is separate from the rest of the house. It would make an ideal studio for noise insulation, lighting, because I would have to have my own lighting. A basement's always dark. So it would be consistent lighting, wouldn't change as the sun was going up and down. And I would be able to fix sound issues because it's a basement, hanging up sound absorption material isn't going to look bad in a basement. And that would be my studio. And then I could go upstairs and that would be my home. So that's what I'm working towards, but it's going to take some time and it's going to take a lot of money. Chad says, are you in a totally other location than your home or just another room in your house? No, I'm in a completely other location, which is why the internet has always been a real problem in this, in my live streams from here. If you watch my last 3 or 4 months of live streams from this location, you'll see I've been struggling with a number of obstacles, including an internet connection. So I got lucky tonight, and the connection's good. So I'm taking advantage of it. Do I have pasties when you go back to Michigan? I don't eat that. No, I'm more of a soul food kind of guy. We need some puppy pics. I'll see what I can do. Gary says he just bought Uncle Carey's Windows 10 optimizer. Awesome. Hope you enjoy it. Is it wise to go third party to gain more clients? Generally speaking, when you go through a third party, you can't keep those clients in most cases. But it's a good way to, if you're just looking for work and you just want to make some money and you want to go through a third party to do that temporarily, I don't know that it's really sustainable. You'll never, as long as somebody's taking a piece out of your check, you're never going to make as much as if you did it on your own. So ideally, that would be a temporary situation, just to get you through. Steve Oldfield wants to know what I can tell you about USB port fuses on the motherboard. You know, I really don't know much about that on the component level, but some motherboards, as I understand it, have fuses that prevent the USB port from frying the motherboard. And that, in most cases, those fuses are self-healing, meaning once they cool down, they reconnect again. But that doesn't mean all motherboard manufacturers that have them, that have fuses, use these self-healing fuses. Generally speaking, when something blows on a motherboard, it's not worth repairing because the cost of boards versus the cost of labor in the United States makes it cost prohibitive and too time consuming. Somebody like Louis Rossman, somebody who does more like component level stuff, would probably be better to ask about that than me. Andrew Sloan says he's still in Michigan there. Hey, I wish I was with you, man. Especially now. We're in the 90 plus degrees Fahrenheit temperatures already, and it's only the beginning of April. I don't even want to think about how soon those 100 plus degree days are right around the corner. And this location does not have good air conditioning. It's going to be miserable. In fact, you can hear the air conditioner running now. It's 9:30 at night. And the temperature outside right now, -79 degrees. So still a little too warm, in my opinion, to open the doors. And last night, later in the evening, it was nice enough to open the doors and windows and let the air through. Kelly Stewart has contributed. Kelly has been very generous. Kelly, thank you so much for your contributions and support. And speaking of that, there were a couple other PayPal contributions I want to shout out from the other day, because the PayPal contributions I don't see till afterwards. And yeah, Kelly sent a $100 Amazon gift card. And I think that's the second one he sent. So I'm definitely sending Kelly a computer. Thank you so much for all of your support over the years. Peter Laycock, also very generous contributions from Peter, as always, joining us from Scotland. And there were contributions from a couple others here that were pretty nice. There was a $50 contribution from Samuel Ramos. And Sam had said, here's a little something for your channel. Very kind, wasn't asking for anything in return. There was a $150 contribution from Tom Backenstow. Tom sent that because he ordered the red and black mini ITX build that we did with the NZXT 510i, was that the case? And when I went to ship it, I've been going to a different FedEx store, and they misunderstood, I think. They overpacked the computer. And the price to ship that was $135. One of the smallest, lightest computers cost the most amount of money to ship. And I was kind of baffled on why it was costing me so much, because I know I usually ship heavier computers going the same distance for less money. And I think what happened is they put it in a box that was too big. And my initial reaction when he mentioned the size of the box was, you know, the price of the box is like $1 difference between sizes, but not the cost of the shipping. If the box is 2 inches bigger in height, width, and length, then it's taking up a lot more room on the truck. And so the shipping could be $40 more because the box is so much bigger, right? They can put fewer packages on the truck, so they have to charge more for the larger packages. And so for whatever reason, I was stuck in the mindset of the cost of the box instead of realizing, oh, wait a minute, that 2 inches higher, 2 inches longer, and 2 inches wider. In other words, going from a 22-inch cubed box to a 24-inch cubed box can make upwards of a $40 difference in the cost of shipping a computer. I know that now, and I was in a hurry and I wanted to get it out.
And I just wasn't going to sit there and argue with the FedEx guy and have him try a bunch of different stuff on the computer, because he was willing to entertain me to say, okay, well, let's try it with it. And I'm like, no, you know what, just get it out. Tom's a good guy. I don't want to delay this anymore. And if it's $40 more, that's fine. Just send it. And then Tom's like, well, I'm not comfortable with that, so I'm going to, here's the money for the shipping. It just wasn't anything he had to do. And that is very thoughtful, and I appreciate it. Not expected, but definitely appreciate it. It's very thoughtful. So a shout out to Tom for that thoughtfulness. And was that all of them? There's a gentleman who's contributed, I think his name's Ross Whitehead, and I've tried emailing him and I just can't get through to him. But Ross, if you're watching, I just wanted to say thank you for your contributions. Aaron Connor's been very generous. I want to get a computer out for Aaron as well. There were a couple smaller contributions. I know Ben Hunter sent a couple, and Robert Rockin' Rob sent me a few. And of course, Joe Bush and Robert Mortensen. I just want to thank all you guys so much for, going above and beyond for free content. It's those folks who contribute that allow me to do this more often, to pay the bills, so that I don't have to bring the income in from my computer repair job to pay for my YouTube job. YouTube's now starting to pay for itself, and it's getting to the point now where I'm going to have a decision to make, because I'm so busy being pulled between the two jobs that I'm going to have to let one of them go. And I think that the YouTube channel shows the most promise for income. The computer tech job, it's just me. There's only so many hours in a day I can work. So even if I optimized every hour as billable, I can calculate exactly how much is the maximum I can make in a year. With YouTube, there's no sky. There's no limit. The sky is the limit. If I can make $1 a year. I can make $10 million a year. There's nothing stopping me but me. So YouTube holds a lot more promise for the income. I'm not real money motivated, except that I can help more people. I can do more things. If there was more income, you'll see I'm giving back to the community. I always give back. The more I have, the more I can give. It makes me feel amazing, and there's a lot of promise in the future of what that holds. On the other hand, if YouTube shuts it down, what do, right? So it's always good for me, and my logic is, it's always good to have the tech jobs on the side, if nothing else, just to have some other income coming in, as well as investments. I'll go back to investments, letting your money work for you so that you're not panic-stricken if something like that were to occur that's beyond my control. G.W. Eisen says, West Bloomfield, Michigan. I lived very close in Oak Park, Michigan, is where I lived many, many years in Oak Park, very, very close to West Bloomfield. Well, it says you need a sponsor, Carey. The problem with most sponsors is they want to tell you what to do. Today, you're going to make a video on our product. You're going to submit it to us for approval. You will make the changes that we ask you to make within this time frame, and you will post the video no later than this day and this time. In exchange, we will write you this check. That takes away some of my freedom and independence. So not every sponsorship is that way, but if you're getting a big sponsor, you're more likely to have to deal with that. So I'm looking at little tiny sponsorships, smaller companies that are grateful for the attention and for the new customers I can bring them. Instead of these big, a company like Samsung, they're not going to deal with me. They're going to want way too much control. And honestly, my audience isn't big enough to even have them consider me regardless. So it'd be nice to find a smaller sponsor that's growing, that can join me as we're growing here on the YouTube channel, and we could grow together and share in the experience and help each other out. But, You know, sometimes things change in companies, and a company that once a good company becomes not such a good company, or they change their value system, and things that they would never have done before, they're starting to do now, because now they have investors, and now they're expected to return certain amounts of value to those investors within a certain time frame, and now they may start doing marketing tactics or software promotion tactics that are not that are no longer something I can condone. But if you're in a contract with them, you're sort of stuck. So you got to be very, very careful with the sponsorships unless you're willing to sell out. Just let somebody tell me what to say and when to say it, which isn't why I started this. I might as well just go work for the company at that point and stop being self-employed. It's a very dangerous road. Richard S. said, I do YouTube plus tech jobs on the side unless you're sure YouTube will be permanent. Well, there's no guarantees in life, and it's always been the other way around for me. It's always been the tech job first and YouTube on the side. Nothing is going to change overnight, but I've been very cautious on any new work I take on. I've got one client that's going to need several days from me that I just won't be able to make videos. Nothing I can do. It's got to get done. And I've been postponing it because of the pandemic. But at some point, I'm going to have to buckle down and get it done. And it's going to be a few days of work to get it done. And then even then, there's probably going to be support calls until it sort of gets all the rough edges off of it. And then everything will be smooth again for a while. So I'm not looking forward to that. And I think that's another thing. You know, I've been doing the tech work for 30 years now, over 30 years. And the YouTube stuff for 13 years. And I'm much more intrigued. I'm getting more pleasure from the YouTube stuff than from the tech stuff. So I'm just kind of listening to my own body say, okay, well, if you're enjoying that more, forget the money, do what you enjoy more. The money will come, you'll figure the money out. Just do what you enjoy and figure out how to make money from it later. That's always been my mantra. And it's also why I'm not driving a Tesla. It's not a money-making mindset that I have. It's sort of like, do what you love. Sooner or later, the money will come. I don't know how. It'll happen. Be patient. If I gave me a choice to do a job I hated and be a millionaire, or do a job I love and just kind of live at the lower end of middle class, I'd rather be on the lower end of middle class doing what I love than being rich having a job I hate. I find value in other things besides money. But I still have bills to pay. Like everybody else. Did I give up on Scythe coolers? No, I've not given up on them. It's just Noctua's offerings became more affordable, easier to install, and more convenient for the motherboards and cases that I use. They also are more attractive. Scythe still makes good coolers. I still use their coolers. However, they're no longer my favorite. Things change in this industry, and they change quick. Scythe was supposed to come out with an all-black edition of the Mugen 5, and while they have black editions of other coolers, and while there is a black edition of the Mugen 5 in other countries, it's not here in America. And it was supposed to be here last year. And for customers that have a case window that don't want liquid cooling, we want a black tower cooler. And that puts me to the Be Quiet Pure Rock 4, I think is what it's called. Is it the Pure Rock? What's it called? Pure Rock 2, or the Noctua U12S. So I've been sort of merging over to the Noctua coolers. They're $30 more, but they just look a lot better. They run really well. I mean, the Scythes run well too, but giving me access into this top right corner of a Corsair 200R case requires that Scythe Mugen 5 cooler to be removed. So with the Noctua cooler, I don't have to remove it. But I still use them. In fact, I just used one the other day. I just I used a Mugen 5 on a motherboard I was prepping 2 days ago. The Mugen 5 it's not a bad cooler at all. I like it. I just like the Noctua better for those reasons. But if I had to build a system on a deadline for a customer, and let's say the Noctua coolers are out of stock, I didn't have any, I'd easily jump either to the Mugen 5 or the Be Quiet Pure Rock 2. They're all sort of equal in my book. It's mostly aesthetics and installation. The Pure Rock 2 from Be Quiet, it's the way the fan attaches is a little weird. The way you got to attach the bracket to the heatsink is a little weird. So it's a little more difficult to install. I'd say the Noctua is the easiest one to install. The Scythe would be the second easiest to install, and the Be Quiet would then be the most difficult of those three to install. But I like how Be Quiet, I criticize them for just giving a little tiny packet of thermal compound. Well, now Be Quiet is applying the thermal compound already on the cooler, so there is no thermal compound in the package. That's one way to handle the problem, I suppose. And I don't think I'm giving Silverstone the credit they deserve on their liquid coolers. I definitely think they deserve more attention. Silverstone reached out to me and they said, is there anything that you want to review from us? And I said, I've got these Core i5s I want to give away to some folks that have been generous in the chat room over the years. And I'm trying to do this as least expensive as I can. I already got the parts, but I don't have the cases and I don't have power supplies. And if you want to send me, a bunch of different cases, I need like 7. And I just need cheap power supplies, 500 watts. And those you could just send, 1, just whatever you got that's cheap, it's 500 watts. And as far as cases go, Silverstone sells a lot of different cases. So I'm like, instead of sending me like 7 of a specific case, send me 7 different cases and I can review them while I'm building these computers that I'm giving away in those cases. And we'll see what's good, what's bad, and maybe I might find a new favorite. And they said, they're on the way to your door. I was like, really? And they said, yeah, we threw in a couple of these other things too we think you might like. Wow, how cool is that? So a lot of gratitude over to the folks over at Silverstone. And of course to Be Quiet. Be Quiet's been very generous in sending me cases of power supplies and coolers to test. And that's all stuff I end up giving away to people when they buy a system. Otherwise I'd be, you wouldn't see me. I'd be buried in cases and coolers and power supplies. It's a hell of a problem to have, right? But trust me, it's not any fun when there's no room anymore. You can't even move in your own house. So rather than sell this stuff and profit off stuff that's been given to me, I want to give back to the folks. These aren't off-lease computers. These are hand-built computers, but they're not being built with all of the same specifications that I would for a paying client. So I can go a little fast and loose with, it might be a cheaper case, might be a cheaper power supply, but I ain't supporting it, right? And I'm not worried about damaging my reputation. I'm giving it away so I can lower the bar on what's acceptable. And that's assuming they're sending me cheap cases, right? They might send me some really nice cases that I might end up using in my business for all I know. Silverstone covers the gamut. They have some really cheap stuff and they have some really nice stuff. And I just said, send me whatever you want, as long as it'll hold a micro ATX board. And preferably it'll be a micro ATX case. It'll be cheaper for me to ship it. But if you want to send me ATX cases, I'm not going to turn them away. And they're like, yeah, we'd love to. We'd love to participate in this. I said, hey, it's a win-win-win for everybody, right? The person receiving the computer, Silverstone gets the reviews and the attention. I don't have to have the expense because the Corsair 200Rs are sold out on Amazon, and I'd prefer to save those cases for paying customers. Also, these are micro ATX boards, and the Corsair 200R is a pretty big case. So we can have a smaller case, less shipping, put Silverstone in the spotlight here on a number of these videos. And they're not paying me, but I'm good with that. I'm totally fine with it. It's very thoughtful, very generous, very kind. There's very few companies that I work with that do that. Silverstone and Be Quiet are the only two. Scythe had sent me some coolers, but they started making demands. It was sort of like, when are you going to post the review and the comparison? I was like, hold on a minute. You think you can hire me to do reviews for the cost of one cooler or 5 coolers? No, these videos, they're worth thousands of dollars. So if you want to send them to me, I will review them as time permits. But if you want to put me on a schedule and have me submit a review by a certain day, you got to pay me for that. I'm not doing that for your cost of coolers. That doesn't make any sense. So then we kind of stopped talking after that. We were going to get back in touch, but I think I felt I was being used, and I just was putting a stop to it. And it's my own fault. I should have stated right up front before they sent me anything that unless they paid me, don't expect this by a certain day or date. But I didn't do that, so that's my fault. But I know better now. I would like to work with Scythe. I think they make good products, but just kind of got off on a wrong foot there. It's a little hard to recover. I wouldn't mind if Noctua wanted to send me some stuff, but I've never talked to anybody from Noctua, ever. Mortmont says, I like that Silverstone Ice Gem all-in-one cooler you used the other day. Yeah, me too. Yeah, I was kind of put off by how big the water block was, but then once I saw it in place, I saw how well it paired up with that G.skill Royal Trident Z RAM. It's very nice. And I like that there's no third-party software to download and install and configure. The RGB matched beautifully. And even when it's off, just that sort of crystal look around the cooler, what they call ice, matches that crystal look, what G.skill calls their crystal RAM. It almost looks like it's made by the same manufacturer and that it's supposed to go together. And that was just dumb luck. I had no idea. Very impressed. I didn't like the mounting mechanism, the backplate, and the way that the screws went through. When you buy a Noctua cooler, those screws are already put in and they're sort of locked in place. I kind of wish Silverstone would adopt that, but I gave Silverstone my feedback, my honest feedback, and if I had one criticism that could make the product better, it's that mounting system they've got for the backplate, specifically on the Intel 1100 series or 1200 series chipset sockets. It's the same coolers are used on both sockets. And so, Scythe has that down much better. Noctua has that down much better. And Be Quiet has that down much better. And it seems like it'd be an easy thing to address. Just a better system for that backplate. The graphics card, we talked about this already, Gary. The graphics card is an RTX 3070 in the streamer. I had a 2080 Ti in there, and that's going to go into another build I've got. But this was the cooler I had, or not the cooler. Geez, I'm all screwed up. This is the graphics card that was in there. So now it's got a 3070. The 2080 Ti goes into another system that has a 1080. That 1080 is going to come out. It's going to go into another system. So I got to play a little graphics card musical chairs here to get things sorted out. And then we have I have another 3070 that's in the Be Quiet build that we did 2 weeks ago. And I still have to bring that build back out because I failed to evaluate the cooler. It's a Be Quiet 360 millimeter cooler, and it should cool admirably, but I forgot to test it, so I'll have to make some time to bring that back out and run Prime 95 on that for 20 minutes. But that should show the best cooling performance of any cooler I've ever had. I'll be shocked if it doesn't, impress me with amazing numbers, because I don't normally install coolers that big. Sir, I have an NZXT H510 case. Can you please suggest a cooler for a Ryzen 7 2700?
I think the Noctua U12S should work just fine. I think I used a Noctua U12S in a 510. I'm trying to remember, what did I use in the 510? There's a build with myself and Steve Bass. So if you just search the channel for, just search my channel, my YouTube channel for the word Steve Bass, and there's a build video where Steve and I are building the same computer. He's in California, I'm in Arizona, and I was instructing Steve how to do it remotely, and so I would show him how to put the part in. He'd do the part, then I'd do the next part, he'd do the next part, or he'd follow along with me, follow my lead. And those were NZXT 510s that we were using. I don't remember what cooler we had, but you can look at that video and look at the parts list. Was there any discovery about the 11th gen Intel's slow crystal disk read-write speeds from a few days back? Yeah, that was solved in the video. I guess you didn't watch the whole video? It was already solved. Do you trust Gigabyte's warranty? Yeah, well, that board came back from Gigabyte, just like any other warranty from anybody else. Did you ever fix the i9 with blue screen of death problems? I don't remember any i9 that had blue screens of death problems. I don't know what you're referring to. Al says, it's been a while, Carey. Life, family priorities for the past year or so. Glad to see you again. Hey, welcome back, Al. Carey, if you don't play games and you don't mine cryptocurrency, what would be the reason for buying something like a 3000 series GPU? Are you running software that utilizes the GPU for design? It's for video editing. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I make YouTube videos. And those videos, when they're not live or after they're live, require editing, and the editing of those videos is tiresome. It's something that's one of my least favorite activities, and it will consume every amount of hard drive space, every amount of RAM, every amount of CPU cores, and every amount of graphics power that you've got. These videos I do, when they're edited, may have 200-300 edit points on top of overlays, graphics, and could be some masking, and it can get pretty intense. So I'm cranking out videos that can be, much longer once they're done than an average movie that you would see from Hollywood. And then they take a while to render, and sometimes I let it render overnight. So with a rig like this one, my rendering time is like cut into a third. I don't have a lot of time for editing right now, but if I go back to it, that's what it's there for. Also, remember I have a YouTube channel, and so one of the ways you attract viewers is by having outrageous hardware, especially the harder it is to get, the more exclusive it is, the more views you get. If I did reviews of cars and I was reviewing a Volkswagen versus reviewing a Ferrari, even though you probably won't be able to ever get a Ferrari, you may never even sit in a Ferrari in your whole life, the Ferrari review video will do 10 times better in views and revenue generation, at least 10 times better than the actual car review of a car you could buy. And so when you're trying to make content that will appeal to the most amount of people possible, there is a certain part of that where you say, well, I'm going to teach people in a way where they haven't been taught. I'm going to show people computer builds that they may have never seen, or building techniques. And I also want to show them hardware that they might be searching for because it's trending in search results, like 30 series graphics cards. So the minute you put one on the screen, if people see that in a thumbnail or they see it in a parts list, they're more than likely to check your videos out. If they like what they see, you get a new subscriber. So you might spend, there's a guy who does car reviews, and he's broke, he just had a regular job like everybody else, but he put away his money and he saved up, and he bought on his YouTube channel, he would borrow like Ferraris and Lamborghinis from people,
to do reviews from like a normal person, not a car enthusiast, but just somebody who just really enjoyed these cars. And his dream was to buy a Lamborghini. Well, he saved up his money and he bought a used Lamborghini, and I think it set him back $300,000. I want to say $200,000. And he didn't have enough to pay for it, so he had to finance it. But the videos he made with it generated more money than the entirety of all the videos he made in the history of time. And so by making that investment, it started to pay back. It paid back half of his investment, according to him, in the first 2 months. He earned back half of what he paid for the car. And he's expanding, and he's gotten more supercars. He doesn't own much. I don't think he owns a home. If he does, it's a very basic house. He keeps the cars in a garage that's nicer than his home, supposedly. And he bought a Bugatti and financed a lot of it. And I think it's $5,000 a month in car payments. And that was with a couple $100,000 down. And he said that one is not generating enough YouTube revenue to cover it. Like, it's not doing markedly better like the Lambo. So when you're making content, you have to consider what you're putting on the screen, what it's going to cost you, and what you're going to get in return for that. And sometimes when you spend for items you don't necessarily want, but you know other people want it, that can result in more views and more subscribers. And sometimes I do stuff just for that reason, just being open about it. Would I have a 3070 if I didn't have a YouTube channel? No. Honestly, wouldn't care. Wouldn't miss it. I'd still be running a 1080. And even then, maybe not. I mean, built-in graphics, really, on the Intel, the HD 630 graphics, they're on my office computer. They're on every office computer I've ever sold. Those computers rock. So, you know, that's why you'll see some stuff here that only makes sense if you understand YouTube content creation and what attracts viewers. Richard S. contributes $1.49. Thank you, Richard. Did the motherboard work with the new Ryzen CPU? There's no reason for you to ask that. This video, you can completely rewind the video to see what you might have missed. You don't have to ask everybody what you missed. You can go back right now while I'm live, just as though this was a pre-recorded video, and you can rewind to see what you missed. I hope you do. You won't have to ask those questions anymore. One of the things that I find interesting is, you know, I enjoy answering questions from the audience if they have actual questions. But if somebody says, is there milk in the fridge? Get off your butt and go look. That's an insulting question. You're just too lazy? So that kind of bothers me. Those kind of questions where the answers are, they can't be bothered to look for themselves when the answer is clearly right there. So I have to be careful, I guess, now when I invite people to ask questions to say, if you have any technical questions, you know, please ask. But yeah, sometimes people just can't be bothered to even make the modicum of effort to just simply look. And so then they say, well, whatever happened in this video? Well, you're on the video now. Go and look at it. I don't understand. Why are we doing a summary when you can just go look for yourself? Richard S. says, sorry, I can't do more. Richard, I don't expect anything at all. So any little bit is more than most. And I want you to know I appreciate it. Just, whether it's a lot or a little, just the fact that you gave anything at all, which is, again, more than most. And I don't expect it, but I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Do clients pay for the shipping of their builds? Well, given that I don't sell computers, the clients are buying their own parts and shipping the parts to me. All I'm doing is putting it together. If I paid for the shipping, then it would cost me money to build computers for people. So how would that business model work where I could stay in business? They have to pay for the shipping. I'm not making any money from building computers for folks online, people that watch me on YouTube. The money comes from the video I make. I don't sell computers, except locally. I don't sell computers to people across the United States. They can ask me what parts they should buy. We can go over the phone, have a consultation. It takes about 90 minutes to figure out what their budget is and what their needs are. Then I can do the research, send them a wish list of parts from Newegg or Amazon, and then they can order those parts, have them shipped directly to me. Once I receive them, I let the client know that the parts have arrived. I let them know when I'm going to be filming the build. And the way the client kicks that whole consultation off is by paying $125 up front. So I know that this is not a tire kicker or someone wasting my time. And then that $125 they paid to get the process started is what's used to pay for the shipping. If there's anything left over, that's my profit. It may be sometimes $20 left over. Other times, like with Thomas Backestow's computer, it cost me more to ship it than he paid. And then on top of that, he paid for it. So it was sort of like, there are some people who don't consider what makes a business sustainable. And so if a business says, I'm going to sell you this thing at 50% off, and your reaction is, that's great, let me buy every one you've got, you're going to very quickly put that business out of business if they allow you to do that. So sometimes a business may have something called a loss leader, where they're going to sell something for less money to get you in the store, knowing that there will be some people who just come in and buy that one thing, but a lot of people, while they're there, will pick up other things. And so it makes up for it. But if everybody just took advantage of the loss leader and nobody bought anything else, that deal would be done and they wouldn't do that ever again. I remember I was working for a guy, and I've told this story before, but he was struggling. The business was struggling. And he had a demo computer that was out on the showroom floor. And he called one of our regular clients and said, listen, I'm in a bit of a pinch for money. I've got payroll coming up, and we have this computer that's, technically it's used, but it's only been on the showroom floor as a showpiece. It's never been owned by a customer. And I'll offer to sell it to you for less than it costs me to build it, just because you're a good customer. I want to make you the deal, and I need it to happen quick because I need money. Do you know what the good customer said in return? Thank you. Can you get me 5 more at that price? So if you hate a business and you want to see a business go out of order, or go out of business, not out of order. If you want to see a business go out of business, so they won't be around to help you anymore, yeah, keep trying to get deals from them and think that they don't deserve to make any money. When I go to restaurants, if they screw up an order and it's like a restaurant I really like and they make a mistake and like, oh, we're going to take that off the menu, I'm like, no, it's fine, you can leave it on. Well, we made a mistake and we don't think you should have to pay for that mistake. I'm like, yeah, but you made it right. So at the end of the day, I got what I ordered. It took a little longer. I didn't come here for a free meal, and I like the food here, and I'd like to come back again without you guys being out of business. So I kind of insist on paying, because if you constantly are giving things away, then you may not have a business anymore. And ultimately, I'm the one who's going to lose because I enjoy eating there. So I'm very cautious and I'm very aware of that, especially with small businesses. They don't make a lot of money. None of the small business owners I know are rich people. They're honest, hardworking, genuine folks, and I want to make sure they get paid. Same goes with the wait staff and servers in restaurants. With the pandemic, fewer people are eating out. And I think it's more important than ever to tip generously. Instead of tipping what's fair, that's the way I've always done it. This is what's fair. Now I think I need to give more than what's fair because there's fewer customers. And if they did a good job, even if they just did a basic job, it deserves more now than it did before. They're putting themselves at risk.
serving the public, not knowing, who's got this disease to pass it on, this illness. And I think that the average tip should be about double right now. So if I'm not prepared to leave a double tip, then I'm not going to geek out. Now things go back to normal, and they're back to having wait lists of people waiting to get in, and the place is packed with people, and they're making all kinds of tips. We'll go back to the normal tipping. But right now, it's pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, it's whatever my normal tip is. I pretty much double it now, and I just think, I hope that little bit, it's not a huge deal. If it's a $5 tip, now it's a $10 tip. It's not like, oh, well, I can go buy a good car now. It's not going to make that big of a difference in their life. It doesn't make that big of a difference in my checking account. But if everybody does that, I think that everybody wins. Earl wants to know if I always get a G connector with every motherboard. No. The G connector is unique to Gigabyte, and then only to their mid-range and upper-range motherboards. The cheaper Gigabyte boards don't come with them. Same with ASUS, they have the Q connector. Some ASUS boards have the Q connector, some don't. But it's an optional thing. It's not required, so it's not. I'm sure if you really wanted one, you just go on eBay and buy one. I'm sure somebody's selling them. And I'm sure they're overcharging for them. I mean, they should cost $2. I'm sure they probably sell them for 10. But again, it's just an optional part. You don't need it for the build. Arnold says, because the serving staff, the restaurant staff, are at risk, the higher tip is a fair tip. Well, I guess that's what I was trying to say. The definition of fair has changed. For me, it has. Whisker Fox says, being somebody who works in the culinary industry and has businesses and partnerships to run and support, COVID-19 has been a grueling crisis to deal with. It is a mess. Yeah. Oh, I know. We've seen a lot of restaurants close up here in Phoenix. Angel contributes $5, says, keep up the good work, Carey. Thank you, Angel. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. We went a full another hour, so we just crossed over the 3-hour mark. I'm glad that I was able to answer your questions and we could interact a bit. I always enjoy that. This part of the video. I enjoy showing you the builds and the challenges, but I also really enjoy talking with you guys. So thank you for hanging out with me tonight. I hope that you had a good weekend. Tomorrow is Monday, back to work, and I got a bunch of errands to run tomorrow, so I don't think I'll be making any videos. I don't think I'll have time. If I have time, I will. And definitely we'll be back on Tuesday, unless something unexpected happens. We're going to continue to plan on 1 o'clock on Fridays for Mitch Morrison to join me and continue with these bizarre computer builds. We still have the big RGB Conquer 2 build to finish. We have the Xenos build. I think I have everything I need for it. No, I don't. There's another part I ordered. Just when I had everything, I changed something. So but that might be here by Friday. So we could do that. All I know is when Mitch joins, we've been falling into this weird routine of building weird stuff. And it's working. Like, we're getting great view numbers, great participation, great contributions. And so I'm just looking around at what I have that's weird stuff and inviting Mitch to come build it with me. So I'm going to keep doing that until I run out of weird stuff. If you see any strange cases, computer cases, where nobody has a YouTube video on it, please let me know. I would very much like to bring unique content here to the channel, but there's a lot of unique cases that have already been made, other content creators have made videos on them. So if you're aware of one that is truly unique, where there are no content, if you type in the model of the case in YouTube search and no videos come up, please bring it to my attention, because I might make a unique build video out of that. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Something to bring more unique content to the channel that nobody else has done before, like that round tube computer. No other builds featuring that, or at least there wasn't when I did it. Gamers Nexus did that space shuttle, that weird spaceship case. I put one of those on order. I think it's going to arrive by the end of this month, so we'll do that one whenever that arrives. So even if it appears in one YouTube channel, that's still pretty rare, and I would do it, or I would consider it. But again, I really want to try and bring unique content instead of repeating what everybody else is already doing. So if you find something, if you stumble on something, let me know. I want to thank you all for watching. Thanks to my friends in blue for keeping it civil in the chat room and with each other, and for all the contributions during today's broadcast. I want to thank everybody who did that, including, and YouTube is still not saving that information for some reason, but Richard S. and is that the only one that's going to show me? An Angel? Boy, YouTube's going to have to fix this problem. For everybody who's contributed, I usually have a list. YouTube keeps a list, but it's not working the last couple of days. It's just showing me the most recent. But I want you to know I appreciate it, and I thank you very much for that. Again, not sure if I'll be back tomorrow, but I will be back for sure on Tuesday. And definitely, you can set your calendar for Fridays at 1 p.m. until I say otherwise. That will be the regular schedule for Mitch Morrison to join me. And if Mitch can't join me, I still plan to go live 1 o'clock on Fridays. And at the very least, that's for sure when I'll be live. In the meantime, I just try and go live as time permits. And I've got a lot of computer cable management and stuff around here that I've got to focus on. And it's so boring, I won't make videos on that stuff. But I might make some videos showing, the completed. You will have seen the board prepped. You will have seen go into the case, and then you can kind of get the final shot of what it's going to look like when the panels go on it and gets off to the customer. And I'll do that as, again, time permits. In the meantime, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening here in the States. And I guess could be 1 o'clock in the morning on the other coast. But you know what I mean. Have a good week. I'll see you all very, very soon. My name is Kog. I'm made of rocks. Don't let that intimidate you. Squirrel moment. I'll see you all very, very soon. Until then, bye for now.